So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or revisions or additions?
Let somebody else go first.
You go first. I have.
Okay, then I will go first. On page 7, item 4, under the action. I believe that bum suiting stepped down on that one too. Did he not? Okay. On page 7.
Do you know him well enough to know that?
Yeah. No, pretty. He's a slippery little character. Okay, and then same page 7, item 5, under the motion. Number 1, I suggest we strike the words concern regarding the. So the motion should read, there is a preference for an expression of symmetry at the elevation with the arches and how the storefront system is expressed. I think that makes better sense.
Yes.
That's more good.
Number 3, motion 3. Replace the existing chain link fence with a wrought iron fence to match strike the word existing, to match the proposed wrought iron gate. So add wrought iron. Can't be existing and proposed at the same time. Otherwise, excellent job.
Thank you. Are there any other additional comments?
This is more of a question. On the same page 7, under item 4, under area C, item number 5, we had said reevaluate the expression of the public plaza. And I was wondering if there was more wording. I think there was a kind of more specific wording saying that the plaza is too large, that it really is not a Santa Barbara, doesn't give the Santa Barbara a sense of style. And
it was too level as well.
Well, if you can put that into a succinct sentence,
because I think Don
because there were lots of comments, but then the actual item for the motion was just a simple sentence. So if you want to include some of those elements, craft something.
Okay. Don, would you? Because it was more the idea of open space in Santa Barbara is usually done with the use of courtyards and paseos, not this great big open space.
We talked about serendipity and all this discovery thing and meandering around.
So,
unfortunately, number 5 says reevaluate the expression. Well, what does that mean?
yeah,
of
that's
course.
what I mean. So,
Basically, I think it means the proposed design was not acceptable.
Simply. I do too, and the comments that you made in the meeting are what the applicant needs to listen to. So, if you, like I said, if you want to add a few descriptive terms there.
Well, we use the term mystery, as I recall, and a couple others. We're getting far afield here.
Well, maybe far afield. But I remember incorporate more than a lawn and trees.
no, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's whether or not we need a plaza that large.
Reevaluate the expression of the public plaza to be more in keeping with outdoor spaces in Santa Barbara.
Outdoor space.
I think
Urban spaces.
I think that's good.
And the garden.
Not everybody would understand that, but I think the architect would.
Okay.
A little bit of landscape architecture.
I said architect.
Are there any other comments or additions or revisions to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention. That motion carries. Next item of business is the consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair, we had one item today. 220 East Ortega Street was final approval as noted, and that was reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
May I have a motion to
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Next item is announcements.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Peugeot will be absent from today's meeting, and Commissioner Adams will be leaving the meeting at 3:45 p.m. 3:45, is that right? Okay.
Correct.
Item 1 on today's agenda at 925 Chapala Street has been postponed 2 weeks.
I'll make
At the
a
architect's request.
motion to continue that at the applicant's request.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Next regularly scheduled HLC consent hearing on May 26th will take place in the Fishbowl Conference Room. And then an appeal of the historic, this is, I believe, a reminder, appeal of your action for the project at 517 Chapala will be heard at City Council on Tuesday, June 22nd at 2 o'clock, and we need 1 or 2 people to represent the HLC at that hearing. You were going to think about it and check your calendars.
Do we have any volunteers? Uh-oh.
Craig, and
Craig
who
will.
else?
Do we,
Pardon? What's that? Date and time again, please. Tuesday, June 22nd at 2 p.m.
do we need to because...
The opposing, two
Oh,
opposing.
I see.
From each side would be nice.
Who was on the prevailing side?
You guys don't remember? I have to check the minutes.
I think
Oh, what?
Fermina would be a good person to go.
Unfortunately, I won't be here.
Okay.
That's why I have not volunteered. Otherwise, I would be the first to volunteer.
Yeah. I think the crux of it, of the denial, was that it didn't respect the historic district, adjacent historic district. I think that was one of the major points that we brought up.
And I think the fact that their
Commissioner
thing
Schauberger, weren't you?
had run
He was
out.
on the minority, as I was.
That's-
Yeah. So we need someone from prevailing side.
I'm having a double knee replacement.
Oh.
Seriously?
A week from
Can
Monday.
you crawl in?
A week from Monday, and I don't know. I could be out a month
Oh, man.
or even a month and a half, depending on all kinds of stuff. So certainly not.
Can you have your shoulder
Yeah.
guy do those? Can you have your shoulder guy do those?
Yeah, I may be able to walk on my hands.
Your knees look just fine to me. Postpone the surgery.
So I cannot do it for that reason.
Oh, you poor guy.
Okay.
Louise,
I'll check my calendar. Okay.
Okay.
thank you.
That's June 22nd?
Yes,
Tuesday at
2 p.m.
Thank you. I know it's not easy to do this.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Are there any other announcements? Seeing none. Last item is subcommittee reports.
Oh, we had a meeting of the designations subcommittee this morning, and we discussed a group of possible buildings that would be eligible for landmark status, and we put them into 1 to 13 order of importance to us, and we discussed the two, four historic districts that we want to take to the council, and we felt that the two to begin with should be Brinkerhoff, where the people really want it, and the bungalow district where the people want it. So I don't know when we'll get to that, but we're hoping to get going on those as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything for Mina or Don?
Yeah, just on Brinkerhoff, Jake has been working on the design guidelines, so that's in progress, and we reckon will be around July when we have those guidelines for the Brinkerhoff. That's all.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you.
You need to come up to
You
the
need to
microphone.
come up and,
Tell them you need to come up to the microphone.
yeah, you need to speak into the microphone in order to be heard and understood.
She's just giving me the...
Thank you. You said there were 13 structures that, and you rank them in order?
Yes.
Can you reveal those at this time?
I don't have the list with me.
The first two are the Brinkerhoff District and the bungalow.
No, but these are individual buildings.
Gotcha, sorry.
Do you remember, Fermina? I think San Marcos was 2.
Well, Madam Chair, I can send that to Mr.
Yes.
DeForest
Mr. DeForest
Okay.
perhaps
later.
you can wait.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Since item number 1 has been continued and item number 2 is not until 2 o'clock, I suppose we can have a 15-minute recess, because I assume...
Madam Chair, I had requested that Jeff Gorell come in. Let's see now, wait a minute. 24:20. Yeah, I had asked him to be here at about 1:45, so hopefully he'll...
So let's
why don't we
say-
take it to like a 10-minute...
All right, let's have a
I'll see
10-minute
him
break.
yet.
10 minutes to 2.
All right.
So are you... for it, and it was concept review on March 17th. And we had straw votes. How many commissioners are comfortable with the pool orientation as proposed? 5 versus 3. How many commissioners would prefer that the north wall of the terrace be plaster? 2 versus 6. In the motion, continued indefinitely with the following comments. The length of the swimming pool might best be extended so as to relate better with the north-south axis. Consider that the pool be aligned on its long axis, better relating to the music room. It was suggested that the center line of the pool and the center line of the music room be aligned. Consider placing the pool out of the ground at the west end to make it more traditional. Study alternative materials for the walls and fences for the pool and the music patio room area. The transparency of wrought iron was suggested, and it would be easily reversible at a lower cost. That action was 9-0. The motion carried. Would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
Okay, my name is Jeff Gorell with Limerick and Minor Architects, representing the owner. And just to get everyone oriented once again, if anybody's viewing and hasn't seen it, the Garden Street is here, the St. Anthony Seminary here, and then way back in here is the Hoffman House, and then Mission Creek. And this area here is where my clients would like to put in a swimming pool very much. I'm going to set this aside, but this is the old Yacht plan, and this is where the swimming pool would go. Originally, the property line ran through here, and this was all part of the gardens and part of this theme. The Friars had sold this off, so that's cut into or violated the Yacht landscaping plan, as you can see. And that plan terminated here, and there was nothing up in this open grassy area. I brought that up to see, let's look at that further. This is the overall site plan again. Garden Street, the house is here, and a swimming pool located here. I'll go right into the larger scale plan. And as you know, the last time we were here, we had we're proposing a plaster wall just on this side to have an indoor-outdoor living space terrace. And we came off of the building here with a plaster wall and a cross with a gate going out. And in the field, it was recognized that the yacht termination kind of clipped the corner of the pool. My clients who really just want a pool have decided that they don't want to go through the controversy of tying in a wall to the building, and whether it's iron or not. We did some studies of iron, and they just do not want to do that. And they said, well, let's just do something very simple to get us a swimming pool. And we have to by code, surround it with a fence. So let's take care of what we can on the minutes, which I think you'll recognize that the first 3 items, we've lengthened the pool, have that access more to your liking or to your request, and we've taken the swimming pool and centered it off the library window. And what was there was a third one?
Length extended, aligned on its long axis relating to music room. Consider them placing the pool out of the ground at the west end.
Okay, and then you'll recognize at the west end, that's exactly what we've done with this Oklahoma flagstone is the closest we could find, and very similar to this existing paving that runs around through here. So what we're proposing is to carry that paving through and have this 2-inch stone as the coping around the pool. And within the pool, you'll have, this is the tile that's in the risers of these steps now. So we want to try to carry that in to the vertical on the side of the pool is the splash. So we feel that that's truly in keeping with the materials that are on site. And then from this transition here, it will just become natural grade. So we're some 1'11" out of the ground. And then we have a reverse retaining wall here of maybe 9 inches, 10 inches in order to accomplish this feel that the board was interested in. We've reduced greatly the pool equipment area, and again, that'll just be screening and a gate to access it. And the screening around the fence, this is we're proposing 4x4 wood posts with a copper cap, just nothing extravagant, and then black chain link or black deer fencing, as they call it, which is actually maybe a little lighter in look than the black chain link, and that would be the owner's preference. They have a dog run over in this part of the property that, if you've noticed that, and it's very well screened, and that's a chain link fence. So this is the type of screening that they're proposing to do around the pool. And again, the idea is just to get a pool, get away from any kind of controversy so that they can get it done and use it. Got a couple of blow-ups. Again, this is the yacht plan walking from below as you're going up through. This is the old picture. Now the pool is stretched, and we're looking to do a gate. This would be 5 feet high at the little arch that you see in form of terminus, and these are about 5.5, 6 inch risers, and you'll see that the dimension as this fades into perspective. I worked on the scale, and that is in fact about 5 feet tall. And the gate construction, Kent Hodges, this is an older gate, and he's built gates on that I'm sure none of you could tell the difference between what was old and what is new. And you can tell that from the letters that were sent in to you and the support that they have, that they truly do cherish this house, and they are good stewards. And one of the findings that you have to make, of course, is that this meets the long-term goal of preservation. And I would argue that these folks have done a marvelous job on this, and by allowing them to have a simple pool with simple detailing and a fence that can be removed around it meets that goal. That if someone's not allowed to do anything to their house, that's the opposite of meeting that goal of long-term preservation. So the long and the short of it is, we did study the alternatives, and we hope that we pulled this back where it's not controversial, and we could get a final today.
Thank you.
Request.
I'm going to ask for public comment and note that I have one speaker, and I also wish to note for the record that we have several letters in support of this project, one from Ms. Skews Cox, to Ms. Skews Cox, and the owners, one of the owners, and one from the daughter of
James Osborne.
James, of Mr. Hoffman, previous owner. And I believe our own historian was in favor of this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Kellum DeForest, and the owners really want and need a swimming pool, and I think it is the fencing that would be most visible, and if the fencing could be as simple as possible and conceivably easily removed at some future date if somebody wanted to return, to make that yacht grounds even more, bring it back to what it was in the 1920s, 30s. The Franciscans selling off that square property on the west side sort of destroyed the yacht design intent, which I presume was to come up the garden path and come up and into that area where the pool now is going to be, and you would get the wow view of Mission Canyon and the mountains, which you don't see from down below. So that's what her design intent is, but I think the circulation has completely changed. So I just encourage that you go forward with this project and keep and I commend the owners for not wanting to attach stuff to the historic house. So and I trust this will be as simple and as easy to put in as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for questions from the commission.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions, actually a few questions. Mr. Grout, why did you choose, or why did the owner choose to not have the pool on a canted axis? Is that something?
That was an interpretation of the last meeting
Okay.
minutes.
Okay. And then are you proposing planting around the fence?
Yes, that was this photograph here. It's a type of planting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not on the plan. I didn't see anything called out on the plan.
I'm not a landscape architect. I figured I'd get in trouble if I did that.
No. Your title block says pool house and pool. I assume there's no pool house.
That's an
Okay.
old
And
title
then how did you arrive at 2-inch thickness for the coping?
that comes in the stone that the owner had tracked down.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Where exactly do the wood posts occur on this fencing arrangement?
They're located. You can see them.
So they're regularly spaced, holding the
Chain
more
link.
chain link or deer wire or whatever you want to.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And never.
And what is that spacing between the posts? Roughly.
Scale, it's roughly 5 feet, something like that. 5 feet 6.
Are there any other
You can
questions?
see them on the elevation.
Are there any other questions? I do have a question. In one of these letters, it talks about where Ms. Yock originally designed a pool in the original plan. Could you point out where that would have been?
That was about here, I believe.
And that is sold off. That's part of the other.
So
property.
it was going in this orientation.
I believe it was,
Does the original plan show that? I don't, is that it?
And then you
That's the
can
one
see-
that's not on the property now, right? It's
No,
owned
here.
by them.
I can show you here. This is the property line here, and that's what's there now. The property line used to come straight through.
So it was this small a pool.
So it was built and sold off when this got
And
sold.
then
I
it was
don't know
ripped
that it
out?
was
So
ever-
it does say existing, that's right.
Right.
I don't know that it was ever built or not. I don't know.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just have one more question.
Yes.
We had quite a bit of discussion about the orientation of the pool, whether it would be off axis with the house or out of alignment with the house. Madam Chair, did we ever take a straw vote on that?
Well, what
can
the
see.
two straw votes were, how many commissioners are comfortable with the pool orientation as proposed, as it's shown here? And
No, I don't believe it was shown that way.
how was it shown?
It was.
It was
We had it
Slightly
off the
canted.
window, and then at the last meeting, it requested that we center it off of the window.
On the site, I think, at the site, you mean?
Well, it's
Or
in
this
the-
one? Or at this one?
It's in
All right,
the
the
minutes.
Is that
Set
the
it off the window, but keep the orientation. I don't know. Maybe that didn't get communicated.
But the overall straw vote at the time was 5-3 in opposition. Oh, no, 5-3 in
Support of.
support, with one abstention.
So I guess the commissioners just keep that in mind when looking at this plan. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Oh, yeah, I do have a question. Okay, so back to the wood posts. Are those going to be stained, painted? What's the finish? What's the look of that wood?
They'll be stained.
Like dark brown or
Call it a
Bright green.
Redwood color, not bright green.
bright red?
Yeah.
I do have a question. I don't know if this is the proper way to ask it. I'm going to ask our historian who sent information in the head and his opinion regarding the reversibility and how this pool is, and also our historian. I'd like to understand a little better the concept of reversibility. As I understand it, the reason we're here is to decide if an addition to a landscape or to a building is where it should be and how it should be. But if you apply the concept of reversibility as you described it in your communication, Mr. Jacobs, then you were kind of saying because it's reversible, it doesn't really matter where it is or how it is. I don't quite...
Well, that wasn't the way that was meant to come off.
Okay.
What I was trying to get at was that, the initial plan that they came in with had the plaster walls and the cloistered effect, and which is very common for that particular architect, that period of time in that style. However, it wasn't on this existing house, and I think that's where the commission felt some level of being uncomfortable. So what they've done now is remove those walls from the plan that you were more or less opposed to, and are providing a pool, which is the first step. The pool is an in-the-ground item. That's generally why when we deal with swimming pools, we consider them reversible because they can be easily filled in, and it's gone essentially. It's a flat item. It's not something that comes far out of the ground and that can't be taken away rather easily. We've also allowed, this commission has approved pools in front yards. I mean, with that same idea that, like the Brinkerhoff mansion, up on the Upper East Side. They originally wanted to put a pool in the front yard and a 6-foot-high wooden fence, and it did get approved ultimately by the commission. Part of the grounds for approval was that it was reversible. It was something that somebody could take back. Fortunately, the owner didn't go through with that one. This one is not visible from the public right-of-way or from the approach to the house. It's being done in a way that there's minimal elevation. You did ask for the back of the pool to come out a little bit, so you will see a little bit of that, but that certainly continues on the reversible tact. And then the other issue is that, our building safety department requires fencing around the pool. So now we get into the issue of the walls versus the iron fencing that you were talking about. The owner really didn't want the iron fencing. In my professional opinion, I think too much iron fencing would call more attention to it being odd than if we had used the cloistered effect that they originally proposed. But the issue here is that they want to get a pool, they want to get it in the ground so they can start using it. This pool is as simple as it can be. It is on an axis. I know there was some dispute as to whether it should be kilted or not. In my opinion, because we're not doing the walls and things, that the axis follows through, and there's that existing walkway that comes down and ties into the gate. So that kind of dictates that maybe the orientation should be linear. And there, again, that's an opinion that maybe Farina might have something about. But the fencing, although we don't normally allow chain link fencing, it's not traditional. It is reversible, and it is going to be completely covered by the hedges that will be planted around it. And then at some future date, a more permanent decking solution could be worked out over time if you wanted, if they wanted to go with something with a larger deck and go back to the concept of some of that cloistered effect. But this way, they get a pool that they can use that's not negatively impacting the historic resource and is reversible. And so that's basically what my memo is about.
And can I ask you just to comment briefly about the historicity of the Yock plan? And I'm not talking about the pool in orientation to the house. I'm talking about the pool in orientation to the Yock garden plan, which I consider to be just as historic as the building.
And I don't disagree with that, but the pool, the part of the landscape area where the pool is, I believe there was no actual landscape area. That was where you had the view across the creek bed into the mountains. Well, that's gone more or less forever. That's never going to come back anyway. I think that, when you look at the yacht plan and you see where the pool was on the original plan, it almost looks to me like that might have been even just a reflecting pool. It's hard to
Right.
say.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
It's too small.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it would have been practical for swimming, and it's not in a place in the site where you would logically put a pool.
Right.
Typically, these large estates, when they did have a swimming pool, pool was a pretty big whoop-de-doo thing.
Yeah.
It was generally on an axis. It was generally visible from the house, as they've done now through the music room windows. So in terms of the yacht plan, I think that this is not disrespecting it in that once the hedge grows in, it's going to look green, just as the green across the creek looks, where the mountain view is already obstructed. And the gate that they're using is a solid wooden gate, which is a traditional gate, and that's what you will see if you're down on the yacht garden looking up towards this pool. You'll see hedge, you'll see wooden gate, you won't see chain link and concrete pool.
Thank you. And Ms. Murray?
Pretty much what Jake is saying is I can see that now that I see that where the pool was. But all the same, that terminus is important in that was the transition from the formal garden to that open view of the canyon. And I think that's the part that needs to be respected.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Chair, one
Mr.
last
Suding.
question. Am I correct in reading this plan right? The pavement ends there, and the pavement ends there. It does not wrap around.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll go to comments.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Suding.
First off, I guess it's unfortunate that you misunderstood what what I felt the desire of the commission was, and that was that the pool remain on that canted axis. I thought that was a nice touch. Once I was up at the site, I realized what that did, and once I read a little bit more about Florence Yock. However, I'm not going to say that this isn't acceptable. When you are trenching for the new utilities, you have to pay attention to certain trees. There's a ficus here on the corner of that sandstone enclosure, and then there's also the eucalyptus. It looks like you're a little bit close to that, so pay attention to those two trees particularly. A 2-inch thickness for coping is probably not doable. You probably will have to go to the 4-inch thickness. In any pool that I've used that Oklahoma stone on, the stone slab, you have to do 4-inch. I don't have a problem necessarily with the chain link fence because it will be planted out. I do like how it's got varying levels on it. Some of it's 6 foot, some of it's 5 foot. I think that helps break up the massing, or not the massing of it, but the linearity of it. However, I caution you that typically chain link isn't acceptable as a pool enclosure because you can get a foothold on it. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, when you have plant material that can support a 40-pound child within 5 feet of that fence, that's not allowed. So that hedge that I read is being proposed, now that I read this letter a little bit more carefully, and it's a ligustrum, wouldn't be allowed. So there you have a problem with the screening of that fence. So it's a catch-22, Mr. Grell. I don't know necessarily that county health is going to jump on you for that because it's not a public pool, but it is nonetheless a material that you can't get a foothold on. Those are my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Could I just ask what the, being kind of dumb on this subject, what the black deer fencing would be? I don't know what deer fencing is.
Well, it's
Not having deer in my yard.
That's something very dear to Kent's heart. He prefers that. And as I understand it, it's 16 gauge wire, and it's more of a linear. It's almost an inch,
like a rectangular
opening look. And maybe that'll be acceptable.
It's got a vertical and horizontal stress to it rather than a diagonal, so it looks a little more traditional.
Grid.
Yeah, it's more of a rectangular grid.
And
A little bit like chicken wire.
the specification is that it be a no-climb grid. So that would prevent a shoe or something like that in getting a hold.
So I'm assuming we could go that route with the deer fencing as a no-climb specification.
Any comments? Further comments?
I can support this as submitted because I felt that the majority of us, when we were on the site and afterward, felt that the pool should align with the house. And I think that the deletion of the plaster wall at the patio and the simplicity of all of this, the simplicity of the pool equipment and so forth, is exactly what we were either talking about or even thinking about as being the good solution.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that I do appreciate the openness of this area, of the library terrace area. I think that's important, and I don't, and I think what I'd like to see before this is finally approved, maybe this can come back to consent, but I'd like to see the exact species of plant and the placement. So even if it's a specification of circles, I mean, or whatever, I think that should be part of this plan, and I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, just to throw this out of your thinking so that they can get going on the construction documents and they can get a final with that to follow. Because we're just talking about a pool and a fence and getting some plants.
I understand, but I think it should be part of the record moving forward at some point. I don't want to hold this thing up, but that'll hold it up. But I think it's important just to have a record of that.
Sure.
plan, and I think this is simple, and I think that I would support it.
Any other comments? Yes?
Question, really. Is this really what you want?
Don't ask me that.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Makes me want to ask you that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think I could expand on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think for the benefit of the commission, you should be aware that staff did meet with the property owners. And the result of that, the reason behind that meeting is the property owners expressed frustration with the time it has taken for them to get through the planning process, and were reluctant to engage into a long study about the enclosure of the pool. And they're willing to respond to the commission's concerns about alignment and so forth. So my job is to deal with people that are not happy with the process and explain to them why they had problems getting a cabana, for example. There are zoning limitations on accessory space, and I needed to explain that there are limits as to what their full plans are. But they also expressed their concern about the having to wait another summer and not having the pool in place. So it was my suggestion that we try to do this in a phased approach with a more temporary solution, so they could move forward with the pool and hopefully have something that's simple, that would not be objectionable and be reversible, because I do understand the idea of reversibility. And so it was sort of my idea to push along this project to get it to a point where we could get them constructed. And if we have additional future plans, and I think they came to this meeting with volumes of research. These folks have, to me, demonstrated that they have a love of this home, and they have done the restoration in a very detailed manner. So they gave me their commitment that they would come back and do it in a more long-term manner, but they're thinking short-term now. And the idea of having this pool in place and coming back one day to have it done in a manner that might be more permanent.
Yes, Mr.
I
Gurriel.
was just going to say they're very, very passionate people.
Yes, we know.
Very passionate about this home. When you call and they don't answer, it says Kent and Tanny Hodges at the Hoffman House.
Yes, I know.
That's how much they care, and they're aged. They're aged, and Kent is ill, and he needs. Originally, it was part of getting the pool in for their granddaughter that was coming over from France in July. That's went by the wayside. But he doesn't know how long he's going to live. And he says, I just got to get this pool in. I got to get this pool in. And so we came up with a solution that would take the controversy out of it. The finding that you are looking for, you're trying to promote preservation of the building. This does that. To stifle somebody from putting in a swimming pool, just to drag it out. Let's say that for solution of because of the wall being attached to the building. Not your fault, but that's something that could go on for a long time to get just right, whether it's wrought iron or plaster or whatever. So the idea was, again, to come back with a simple solution, a simple swimming pool that could be approved, so they could get it in the ground.
I understand, but you weren't asked. I won't need you to answer the question, which was what would you would like to have done. But one comment I would make is, if in fact there was a desire to have a long-term solution, I think we would have, just like in the El Encanto or any other project, would have liked to have known what the final desire was, so we knew where it was heading, and so that we could have some idea of what we're approving and where it's headed and why, and whether it was actually a feasible solution in our minds.
I don't think that the Hodgetts, is my understanding, that they're committing to come back with a different solution.
That's correct. They want to have the pool in and be able to use the pool, but they did indicate to me that since it was reversible, there could be a final solution proposed that would be more key, maybe more authentic for that type of architecture.
I see.
Madam Mayor, I would like to make a motion.
When did she get a?
I just forget the whole electoral process. I'm done.
I would vote for you.
That was my yesterday script. Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would like to make a motion for final approval with the condition that the landscape plan come back to consent prior to the issuance of a building permit for the pool.
I'll second.
And with the required historic resource findings, which are the project will not cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of a historical resource. Period.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Indefinite to consent then?
Jeff?
For 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks to consent.
Okay.
Fine.
We can go forward, and if I'm 2 weeks, I can submit to the building department. I don't have to wait. Yeah, we can submit. Okay. Good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
under
I abstain.
discussion, I feel it's unfortunate that this project dragged out, and I know that I'm responsible for it, and I think everybody else on this commission is responsible for it, and I apologize for that. I also feel like we didn't get what the ultimate desire of the applicant was, and that makes me very sorry too.
However,
I'm not entirely clear why the change between preliminary and final. You received preliminary for the previous plan. I think you would have gotten final for the same plan, except maybe the plaster wall out there. So I don't know why all of this changed. You were given approval.
Madam Chair?
It was continued
Excuse me,
concept.
Commissioner Schellenberger, I kind of caught the tail end of that. This had not received prelim.
No.
Well, you're right. I'm sorry, but there was a straw vote at the time that expressed general approval.
That was my feeling at the time as well. Is that you got a swimming pool essentially approved, and it was a matter of the wall material, and that under normal circumstances one would continue to come back and show that. The owners, you understand, they just didn't want to take that chance.
Keep in mind, this is also the second time they've been here with the pool, so that they went through a process before where it didn't get approved.
You see that? Yeah. I showed them that, and they said, there's no way. I showed them that, and I said, well, that just fits in beautifully with the house. But anyway.
Yeah.
That's, God, I wish I could retire.
and you might tell them that October is our warmest month here.
I think they know that, and I'm sure if they're watching this and they're very appreciative right now, I can.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Approval. That's for sure.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Honestly, Godspeed to them, and start digging.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Our next item of business is 228 East Victoria Street for a concept review continued. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the comments from our continuation. It was on April 14th. It was continued 2 weeks with the following comments. This is an interesting proposal, and it is supportable. There should be a general toning down, such as treating the west elevation in plaster rather than tile. There is also concern as to how the tile interacts with the existing stone. Revisit the shape of the proposed pots, perhaps with a finial or plaster treatment. Will you introduce yourself for the record?
Sure will. My name is Jeremy Roberts. I'm the architect on the project, and we took your comments to heart and addressed each one accordingly. In this set, I also included a demolition plan of the existing building, so see the shape of what was there. Floor plan did not change. The changes occurred on sheet A3.1, where, if you'll recall before, we had the blue pots on top of each finial. We toned that down. I was actually able to pull the parapet down just a bit. Simplified. In looking at the project again and taking your comments into heart, I decided it was better to just put the tile at the points of interest rather than create a ribbon around the bottom. So we've got the tile at the entry gate, as well as at the window sills of the new windows we're putting in the side elevation, and then on the slope sill of the windows on the front. I've also simplified the parapet so that before I had a sort of a cove, sort of a transition detail on the front, and I just simplified that just to tone everything back and kind of make it feel more calm on the street front. I also removed the pot that I had at the back of the building as sort of to really put the importance to the front and the Victoria side of the building. This back corner you really don't see until you get on the sidewalk looking back there, and from the rear elevation there are apartment buildings and structures that you don't see. So I appreciate the comments, and I think it's actually a more sort of a calm building for the street front.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll have questions from the Commission. No questions, then we'll move to comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think he's done everything that we requested very well, and I think it's a handsome remodel and to a rather plain building.
Thank you. Yes?
I think this is actually going to improve the neighborhood, and I'm in support. In fact, I'd make a motion. It's just concept review, so I'm not sure I can make a motion, but we could give this preliminary.
Excuse me, Commissioner Adams, what did you say?
This is a concept review, correct?
No, it can receive final. It's the environmental assessment is done.
Okay.
I was on vacation last week, and unfortunately the little tag from 2 weeks ago where it said project, you could take action if enough information was provided, that was accidentally left off the agenda. So yes, you may give it final.
I'll make a motion for
Shouldn't we have some details for final? Yes, I don't think we should give final.
Okay. I'll make a motion for preliminary with final details to come back to consent.
Security.
In 2 weeks or 4 weeks or indefinite, is that okay with the applicant?
2 weeks would be
2 weeks?
fantastic.
Do I have a
Jeremy,
second?
when you do that, can you call out or do a section through this little to say how deep that is?
I will.
Or maybe a roof plan?
If you, on the side elevation, I've actually got, it's a 3-foot tube, the little...
Oh, I'm sorry. It's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
But I will draw a section through that.
Do I have a
That's
second
good
for
enough.
that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good project.
I'm going to call for item number 4, which is 1900 West Swain Road, for final review on a proposal to demolish existing cottage number 12 and construct a new 3215 net square foot Spanish style cottage. Regrading. Thanks.
bit intimidating.
We're all smiling.
Good, good.
There, have an M&M.
It's really good to be back.
Of course.
The old days. No, I'm sorry.
I'll give that to you, Craig.
Okay, here, do you want this? Or just leave it here? I don't think we knew that Michael was going to be out. Thank you. You're the best.
Will you introduce yourself for the record? And before the presentation, I'm going to ask Ms. Kennedy to do a sort of overview, if you would. So if you'd introduce yourselves to the record, please.
Trish Allen with Suzanne Elledge Planning Committee.
Jim Lefevre with Gensler Architects.
Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to give you a little introduction, overview of where we are. Last time you saw the El Encanto Hotel project, I believe, was back in December of '08. Since then, the revised master plan did go to the Planning Commission, and it was approved, and then it was appealed to the City Council. At that point, it was heard in April of '09, and the project was sent back to the Planning Commission to have the neighbors and the El Encanto were told to work out their differences and redesign the northwest corner. So just that portion of the project went back to the Planning Commission in September, and that northwest corner was approved at that time. So we have a approved revised master plan, and I wanted to let you know that the northwest corner portion that you have not yet seen will be reviewed today, later on. And then an update on the project as a whole. We've been told that the hotel is planning to open in April of 2012. Sorry. So that's 2 years from now, or a little less, and that's quite a schedule that they need to meet. In doing so, they would need to get through the HLC reviews by September of this year. So that's actually just 9 meetings, including today, and it's quite an aggressive schedule, and we're hoping that you can think about that schedule and help us try to figure out the best way to handle it. We have a subcommittee that has been picked to work on this project, and if we can talk about also how they can help move the schedule along. I have put together just a small memo that I'll pass out to everyone, listing the projects that you will be reviewing between now and then. I'll give you a moment to look at that.
And staff, can you remind us who the subcommittee is? Because I know I'm on it.
I believe Michael Drury, Suzette, and
Mr.
Schellenberger. Yes.
Okay. And me. And do we need a landscape architect on that? Do you foresee that? Mr.
I personally don't think so, because I think we can review that.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think we need to burden the subcommittee with that. No,
Okay.
I'll be happy to do it.
Okay. Let's take a look.
So if you take a look at this memo, it does outline all the items that need to be reviewed between now and September. We have Cottage 12 and the Arbor Restoration, which are both on your agenda today. Those are from previous approvals. And the Cottage 12 and the Arbor both need preliminary and final, even though the agenda says final. Preliminary has expired. It's been quite a while since you've looked at those, so we'll need preliminary and final in both of those. At some point, Cottage 29, which was already reviewed and given final, would need to be reviewed again because there's some changes that are being requested. You'll see that it's right next to the northwest corner, and it's impacted by those changes there. So we'll be talking about that at some point in the future. And then the final areas are all the revised master plan components. And you've looked at all of these, like I said, except for number 1, the northwest corner, which you'll be looking at the first time today.
Yes.
So if you'd like to give me any comments on the schedule now, that'd be fine. If you want to wait until you go through the agenda items and think about it a little bit, we can talk about it afterwards.
I think that's probably the wise, because we have no idea what we're about to see.
Okay.
I didn't hear that last part.
I said I think it's wise to talk about schedule after we see what we have no idea what we're going to see.
Well, hopefully this won't come as a complete show.
Okay.
So let me just give a couple preliminary comments. First off, as we went through the appeal process, one of the concerns was the way work had been presented to the commission, and there was a concern that you were seeing bits and pieces without context. So one of the things that we've agreed to do is to try and bring each component in that you're going to be looking at with a little bit more context, and that's what this first sheet is about. We've essentially divided the site into 4 quadrants or zones. Today we'll be looking at work in what I've identified here as Zone 3, and also the pink area up here, Zone 1, which is the northwest and the southeast corners. Most of the remaining work that we'll be looking at will be in these 2 quadrants, with the pool also to come. And what we're going to try to do is, as we bring each quadrant in, we'll try to bring enough context in to have an informed discussion about what that component is that we're talking about. So we're not looking at an individual piece. Okay. Just zoom in just a little bit more real quickly. What we're looking at today is Cottage 12, which is one of 2 buildings deemed not to be historical that were in the original quadrant that we're looking at today. The 2 non-historical buildings were Cottage 12, which we're to demolish, and Cottage 13, which is considered to be the honeymoon cottage, and it's being restored. Cottage 12, and we have some photographs of what Cottage 12 looked like. It was called the Overlook Cottage, and in many ways it's eminently overlookable. It probably was the saddest building on the campus. I was never quite sure how it had come to be there, or why it ended up looking the way it did. It actually got some elements of almost international style to it, in terms of the metal railing and the very flat roof, and it was all oriented to the south, which is where the view was, logically enough, that the sides and back of the building were really undistinguished. It was very blocky. So if you want a candidate for removal on this site, this is very high on the list. It was a 6 keys. There were, again, undistinguished keys in the hotel. I suspect it was it's interesting metal corner windows and some features that just were totally strange for the campus, and you just had to figure that it was another time and another place when this thing was approved and put up there. Do we have available a large format of Henry's sketches? Let's start there.
Yeah, we brought them.
So this was what we had as a preliminary approval, which I gather is now expired. And what we did, the owner engaged the services of Henry Lenny to look at this project, and what we've done is tried to put in a building of approximately the same square footage. It's less than 200 square feet larger than the original building was. The same number of keys. I think the only difference in the key count is one of the keys could be considered a junior suite instead of just a standard guest room key. The others are there are 5 guest rooms and one, you might call it a junior suite. The real big effort was to come up with a piece of architecture that fit into the context of the historic hotel a lot more effectively than what was there. Obviously, the owner is really interested in the quality of the experience that their guests have staying there, and a lot of that experience is just the charm of the place. And what Henry did in producing these drawings is really spend a lot of time, and he has over the years, studying the property and referencing details that come from the other elements of the project. So most everything you see here on this building is sort of touches on components of the existing project. So this was what you had seen, and I believe in the preliminary and had approved, even though I gather it's now expired. The big difference planning-wise in this building is that instead of being almost a motel-type building, a block of 3 absolutely rectangular keys, we now have a fair amount of undulation and manipulation of the exterior of the building. The building sits on a hill, as does all of the campus. This is the south side, it's the low side. This north side is the higher side of the project. The attitude we've taken as the executive architect is, let me make sure I got the right, that the keys on the lower unit, because they are on grade, do have to have accessible entrances, so we've had them address the path here and have a level entrance to the keys. The keys on the upper floor, because we aren't going to propose an elevator in this building, are not accessible, and we will work with the building department to figure out how that goes. So the keys on the upper unit, the upper floor, are all accessed from the north side of the building. This key on an individual stair, and these 2 keys off of a stair that's shared jointly with a landing. And this is the site plan and more of the same information. So the bit of history, I wasn't here for the exciting moment, but this was brought to you toward the end of 2008. At the time, it had gone from Henry to Gensler, and we worked on it with the owner's team to turn it into a realizable building. I think that the decision at that time was that we had gone too far in regularizing the design, and that we had lost some of the charm that Henry had tried to work into the design. So our commission at that point was to go back to the source documents and realize that charm that you'd seen and approved the first time around in the elevation of this building. So get to here. Now, in this set, we've done a couple of things. Just to jump ahead for just a second, the last couple sheets in here. The last sheets. Apologize for bumping around a bit. Okay, the last 2 sheets in the set are the elevations for Cottage 13 and Cottage 11, which are the 2 most adjacent buildings, so that if you want to take a closer look about what these buildings look like and how our proposed building relates to the existing buildings, we invite you to do that. Cottage 11 is the one building that is deemed historic. It is a 2-room suite with a lock-off in it, and it is without a doubt one of the more charming buildings on the campus. Cottage 13, which is called the Honeymoon Suite, is, again, as I noted before, a non-historic building. It has some charm to it. Most of the charm is internal, frankly. It's otherwise fairly undistinguished little building. If you're a honeymooner, this would be a great place to check into. we assume you're going to spend a lot of time inside and enjoy the facilities. But that one, of the two buildings, that one had enough charm and utility that was deemed worth saving.
And they're shown.
And then this again, from the south, this is Cottage 13, the honeymoon suite. This is a little chunk of Cottage 11. So you can see the rough adjacency, the vertical differences. This one is slightly higher in grade. The grade generally slopes off to the west, as well as sloping pretty dramatically to the south. So anyhow, this is going back to the building. We have really made a pretty strenuous effort to go back and look at where we had wandered off from the Henry designs, the Lenny designs. A lot of it had to do with the shapes of the chimneys. We had become a little bit more regular. Features like this column, which is a little idiosyncrasy that had been dropped in, had been left out of the design. It's now back in. The treatment of, I think we simplified the metal balcony somewhat, and that has been elaborated more.
Can we set those elevations again? Can we just place them up to what we had seen before?
I pulled out the set that's in the city file, so I wanted to make sure.
Oh, great. Good idea. Thank you.
But I think I brought them.
Thank you.
Yeah, there were a couple versions of these too, so there was from time to time a little confusion in terms of
Right.
what we were used
Right.
for.
Yeah. So that's what I'm. And these are now doors, and that's.
Maybe another one with a column there.
These are doors now.
Okay, then
Yeah, so we're looking at north and south then.
Yes.
So it'd be these. So we can fold these back and see those guys.
Of course, they're a different scale.
Yes. We'll blow up our minds.
Yeah. Couple things that you'll see different.
Solid rail.
Yeah, and the solid rail's been swapped back and forth. We wanted this mass to be diminished a little bit as it gets pretty close to the sidewalk in front.
The changes in general are related.
Yeah, but most of the changes here are related to sort of technical issues.
Got a wall now?
Yeah, this is a wall. And a lot of this has to do with, and we'll see when we look at the side elevations, how we deal with the grade coming up along the side of the building. Because we're already picking up, as you see coming across that little wall, some grade elevation. So we've tried to build a little patio, and when Katie talks about the landscape, she can describe a little bit better what we're trying to achieve there.
This is
So a little water feature
quite
on the back.
proportionately quite different.
Yes. And this is pretty key.
And I'm going to ask for relief from that because I think in a sunken patio on the north side of a building, the water feature is the last thing we want. It's going to be dark and cold, and water belongs in the sunshine.
Quite a bit bigger. And that one's, I see.
Okay. Okay, we can offer to go through things. Unfortunately, this is a different drawing than one I was looking at.
Right.
So this is essentially what we have here. This, you're correct, this did become the entry to this key.
And these lines are...
What we have is the wall flares out to the bottom. We've picked that sweeping detail up, and it actually is repeated here in Henry's drawing.
These lines go in I mean, what are these lines here?
The word is escaping me, but the wall sweeps out as it comes down. So this is a vertical piece of wall.
I see. So you buttress it out.
Batter down.
Yes, batter down. Okay.
And that happens a couple places on this building, but obviously to make the door work, we have to have a piece of vertical wall to work on. And these wrought iron details were picked up off of other buildings on the site, Cottage 6. So.
And is this a practical difficulty where the height of this roof is? I'm sorry, I should not be asking questions. I should let you just show this.
Well, this is the height of the ceiling. Obviously, we get into structure as we get above it. The back side of this elevation, these are restrooms, to the bathrooms, to the keys, and so practically the ceiling there's a bit of a challenge there because we have mechanical equipment above the ceiling.
Okay, should we look at the other elevations then?
Okay, here I think you see the challenge that we're running into. We have the main circulation path for the site down here, and you'll see that when we look at the landscaping drawings. We have to get up to that entrance on an accessible grade. And then we actually have a path that goes between this cottage and cottage 11, which is out here, that is actually an inaccessible path that is too steep to achieve accessibility on it. And then across the back, so essentially our accessible routes across the campus are the east-west routes, and then further to the west we have a north-south route that connects them together. But you clearly see that we're getting pretty deep into the hill by the time we have a legitimate accessible door. Yeah. As this wall planned out, this is the bed wall in the bedrooms, and it just really didn't work to have a full-height door on that wall. What we have, if we look at the plans, is there's a fireplace on the other wall and the entries on the other wall, so this is really where we're going to end up putting the bed in the room. So I think Henry had originally shown this balcony to cantilever quite a bit further out. I think in Alex's report, she asked that the balcony be removed or minimized, and what we've opted to do is minimize it to maintain the look.
Okay. Just a quick, there's a lot more plaster above this. I don't know what's changed. Has the height of the window changed? Has the floor line changed? Why is that quite different in terms of proportion?
I think we ended up with more structural depth there. And I apologize for this. We stopped working and picked it up again, a year and a half ago. But I think we ended up with more structural depth there than we thought we were going to. It would be possible to explore, because I see the windows are not far off the floor. It would be possible to explore bringing them up a bit, I think.
Thank you. I'm sorry. So, do you want to keep presenting? I should not be asking questions. Sorry.
I'm perfectly willing to entertain questions.
Well, I'll put questions at the end. So is there anything else on this plan that you wish to continue talking about?
Not really. I think as you look at these two plans, you'll find that they're pretty close together, with the exception that we clearly had some challenges meeting the grade as we came around the corner with the civil engineer and, as I said, achieving accessibility to the south side.
Okay.
I think here's a indication of the structural depth problems we had, that challenges on the windows.
Yes.
But, as I say, we can explore. We've tried to, this is the south side, tried to bring it up as tight as we can. It may be worth going back and taking one more look to make sure that we can't reduce the amount of plaster above those windows and get them a little more out of the hole. I'm sure no one would be terribly unhappy if that were the effect. Again, this is a section cut through the middle, just to sort of see how the stair develops. We did develop a mechanical vault down here. It's going to be virtually invisible. It's access through the store. But that's where the heat pump equipment is going to be.
Okay.
So you want to talk landscape?
You bet.
Katie, will you introduce yourself for the record?
I'm going to switch my... Katie O'Reilly Rogers, landscape architect. So I thought I might start with a little bit of an overview on El Encanto. Some of you were on this commission 5 or 6 years ago when we started, but the way we started with the landscaping was with the premise that we would save as much as we could save, which mostly meant trees. And we did a photo assay, which we brought in to show you, of existing plant material up there. We weeded out plants, no pun intended, that we thought were probably not historic to the 30s, so contemporary hybrids, variegated plants, things that weren't available in the 30s we chose not to reintroduce. That overall plant list has been looked at, reviewed, and approved by this board. Every plant on every package is taken from that, with a new overlay that, since this is high fire zone, we had to get rid of some of the plants and locate them further away from the buildings. So for the new building 12, the only thing that changes is the tree preservation plan. There's a really beautiful dragon tree right here, the Dracaena Draco, and we have relocated it right across the pathway. So in terms of the view to the building, it's going to be similar. There's a bottle brush and a really ugly yucca that we are going to be removing. That was on the original removal plan. And then there's a 60 feet tall, plus or minus, Washingtonia, the fan palm, that's going to stay right here. The pathways are similar to what you saw in the previous Overlook Cottage. Brick on sand, the same details that we've been using. And the plant material is just what you saw before, only adjusted to the new building shape. And the one thing that I wanted to suggest for your consideration is this: to get into the back here, to go up the stairs, there's a little stair that goes down to a lower patio off of this downstairs unit. And off of it is a planter area in a well. That's where that fountain on the elevation is. Looks really cute on that elevation. In practicality, I think it's a foolish place for a wall fountain. It's dark. It's going to be dank. It's not a place where you sit and enjoy it. You walk by. And I just don't think water belongs in shady areas on the north side of it. Water belongs in the sunshine where you can see the light and reflection. Oh, he doesn't agree. That's all right. So we are happy to leave that fountain there. I think it's a mistake. I think it would be a better looking building without it, or just maybe a tile medallion if you feel that the elevation needs something. We do have climbing vines back there. I don't know what we have. No, that's the baby tears down in the little garden. I can get back there. It's so shady. I've got some baby tears, some clivia, and farfugium, the leopard plant, I thought would be pretty down in there. So I don't think that fountain's necessary, but it's shown in the package if you all want it.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right, I'm going to ask for public comment. And I think the first person is Mr. DeForest.
I hope this is the place to make this comment, but we're starting out on the Ellicott, because certainly the replacement of Overlook is, I concur that it definitely needs to be replaced, and it look, and what they planned looks fine, it would fit in. But as chairman of the Preservation Committee, But as chairman of the Preservation Committee of the Pearl Chase Society, I've been getting a number of people have called upset about the perception that every building on the El Encanto campus seems to be, or they think they're all going to be destroyed. So could possibly someone, or Ms. Cole, tell me which cottages are being retained? I think that would relieve a lot of people's minds, but maybe this item is not the place to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps you could have some private communication about that. I think that would be good.
What?
I think some private communication between you and Ms. Cole.
Oh, okay, fine.
that, tell them, I'll do that, they have to do that with you.
Thank you.
Great.
The next public comment will be Mr. Martinson. Oh, I'm sorry. You're going for number 6. Yes, you got a little early on this one. Okay, let's have some questions from the commission, please.
Clarify. Renderings, what was the preliminary approval that has expired?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from this commission? Let's start with comments then. Any comments? You've overwhelmed us, I guess.
I guess I'll just speak about the fountain on the north side. I don't object to it. I don't object if it's gone either. But when I think of grottos and things like that, they're often in shade. So
I don't want a mossy, slimy grotto.
why not? It makes no difference to me whether it's there or not. I do think it's a nice little element to walk by. Sometimes the introduction of just a very soft water sound is appealing.
Thank you. Now remember, we are here for a re-approval of preliminary.
Does that include everything, or are we just discussing
On this number
cottage
12. Just on number 12.
I don't feel that cottage 12 as it exists is a great loss. It's not one of my favorite buildings. And I think basically what's being proposed is pretty close to the Lenny drawings and probably is acceptable. I don't have a feeling one way or the other on the fountain.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will go back and make a comment about the architecture. If we
Thank
could go
you.
to the
Yes.
elevations here.
Thank you.
I believe I went too far. You could probably get there faster than I can.
Possibly. Depends on how well my thumbs work. This is the
One.
side elevations, or you want the...
North and south. With respect to what we had approved on this portion of the building and the Lenny plan, I disagree that this massing needs to be brought down. I liked it better when that was a solid rail there. I think it just had more importance, and I don't mind that it's maybe a little bit incongruous with the pedestrian walking by. I think it's far enough away from that pedestrian walk to feel comfortable. The Lenny plan also had a wrought iron or an open railing here. I wouldn't object to keeping that as you've shown it with a solid railing. I think it's fine to have that heavy massing down on the ground floor read all the way across. So I would either switch those or switch that back to plaster.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
would agree with that comment. I think that having, in a hotel motel situation where you have one floor level and you don't have any chance of getting any vertical serendipity, that oversized proportion is much better than having this just sort of be predictable and so forth. This commission will be very concerned about the detailing of the brackets for the balcony, the size of the material, and the light fixtures, and the chimney cap, and how, if these are real fireplaces, where is that, how is that constructed, and so forth.
I didn't point out there are actually a couple sheets of details in here that we didn't look at that do depict some of these elements. This, for example, is the chimney that you just asked about. What we're essentially doing is putting a stucco cap on it. There's a faux terracotta surround about it. They are gas fireplaces. That's what we're going to be permitted to do anymore. So that covers up the metal spark arrestor that you'd sort of...
Is this sheet metal here? I don't believe it shows on the
It
section.
should be a stucco top.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. And these are actually details we've used on a number of the other cottages where we've done renovation or new work. I don't think there's anything here that this commission hasn't seen before. So we're really kind of working from a kit of parts that we've established on the campus previously.
Okay.
So the copper gutters, the flared stucco that we see on
Right. And the balcony brackets and handrail, actually, also.
Now, I have to admit, this is not a structural drawing yet. The bracket was basically duplicated off of some that we find on Cottage 6, just a little to the south there. And this is generally the handrail detailing and finials that we've picked up to reflect Henry's drawings. I think this plane in here where the structure is could conceivably get beefier once we get an engineer working on it.
Okay, well, we are going to be, I mean, the devil is in the details, and we're going to be very concerned about that.
And then the light fixtures, again, we're working with a palette of light fixtures for the campus that Henry established quite some time ago. We're just reusing the same package of fixtures.
And we all understand that going from Henry sketches to, CAD drawings done by you is
sometimes a challenge,
a large step.
Thank you.
That's all.
Other comments?
First of all, I want to say, and you've probably done this, but we have a new water conservation ordinance, so just make sure that is going in the right direction.
Historic plants that do not fit on Billy's waterwise list, but the conversation we've had with this board and with staff is that historic precedent trumps that list. And as long as those plants are located on the north or the east side with awareness of water use,
it's a good,
then it's okay.
good point. Just try to minimize maintenance and water use. And then I appreciate you keeping the Dracaena. That's a kind of a wonderful old specimen, and in these plans, and the Washingtonia. Let's see, and then the comment I want to make on I think it's the south elevation. I agree with the comment. I don't like the open rail. I think the solid plaster rail was more it was more in keeping, and I also feel like some of the windows are too wide, got too wide, and there's something about the proportion of stucco to the fenestration that was nice on the Lenny drawings, and I'm missing it. I feel like things have been widened, and I feel like the proportions should be examined more compared to those old sketches, because the Lenny sketches, which had a charm, and some of the charm or the fenestration is I'm not seeing it on these elevations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yes.
Can I also get a clarification? I understood from staff's comments at the opening that we're looking for preliminary reapproval, but are we saying that this is not ready for final based on some of the comments I've received earlier, or are we trying to do both here? And is that two motions or one?
I think you're reading the tenor correctly, that theirs may not be ready for preliminary, so there's no point in asking for final.
Preliminary, or I was reading that it wasn't ready for final.
Well, let's see when we have a motion floated. Yes.
Well, just to finish the thought, the concern is schedule with this 9 meetings thing. That's my concern.
If you're ready to go forward with preliminary and final, you can do that in one motion, I believe. If you're ready. Yes.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's actually kind of a question comment. Have we ever seen a sample of the new brick paving that's being proposed?
Yes, you have. And what's happened is the old brick, that's truly old brick, has been lifted and stored on pallets. The brick that was filled in the 80s and 90s, that's brand new brick that has some white paint on it, smeared to look old, is being tossed. And the brick that's being augmented is matching the old brick. We're tentatively using Sepulveda building materials. The detail on the plan and that the contractor is using is reclaimed, reused old brick.
Okay.
It's not new brick that somebody fusses up.
I'm sorry, I didn't look at the detail close enough. Are you blending that then with the old brick?
We could, although it's the same brick. I'll bring some samples in for you.
If we've already approved them, I don't have a problem with it at all. I guess I wasn't here.
No, you took a break.
Thank you. I will add a few comments. I very much appreciate your presentation. Very clear, succinct, and laid out the problems and the solutions. You opened the door for me when you said you could change the structural depth. I see, as Mr. Adams has said, changes to the proportion of a preliminary elevation that I find distressing. Some of these I think are changeable. I think this can be brought back to the hovering little shed roof as opposed to the lifted shed roof above there. I think and agree with everyone else that the unfortunate change of this guardrail from plaster to railing was a decision I prefer not to have happen. I commend you on some changes. Putting in that quirky column makes sense, but again, what I'm seeing are some changes that I think change the character of what we saw and approved. So I will entertain a motion, and then we'll see what comments will go with that motion when it goes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would move to grant preliminary approval.
With comments.
Yeah, with comments to return in 2 weeks.
Do you wish to include the comments regarding these guardrails?
Yeah,
and,
yes.
And all those, okay. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, I need a second for that.
I'll second it, but I would like to mention that this window crowds the edge of the roof too much. I'm just saying, with the shadow and shade and everything, it's very hard. Same thing with pushing that up. This needs to come down. This is about 6 or 7 inches of plaster here. I know it's concave, but this needs to come down a little bit. This is 8 feet. It could come down to 7 feet and be a much better punctuation in this negative space.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't know. I sort of disagree with Commissioner Sharp's comment. I think sometimes it's okay to push a window if it's small enough and narrow enough right up in. I mean, I'm always saying, oh, we need more mass above a window or an arch or something. But in this case, if it's a small, narrow window, I think it's okay to push it up into the eave a bit. But
Well, whoever's going to make the motion, let's attach comments which people can vote on. How's that? Whoever is making the motion, please attach comments which will be voted on and will be direction for the applicant. So it's very clear what we like and don't like about this preliminary.
I would attach Commissioner Sharp's comments regarding the windows to the motion.
Okay, can I intervene?
Yeah.
Ask a question of Commissioner Schallenberger. What about the fountain? I don't need the fountain.
There was no feeling.
Okay.
No one that commented had a feeling one way or the other, so the applicant has to remove it.
Okay, well, I need a summary of this motion so that the applicant understands how to move forward. So we have a motion for a preliminary approval. There is, I think, general agreement regarding returning the guardrail on the southwest corner section of the building to plaster. I'm not sure, but I believe there is some desire to return the middle portion of the south elevation back to a railing, that there is some concern regarding the proportions of the current openings in the plaster, and that there is no preference regarding the fountain on the north elevation. And I'm sorry, what was that you said, Don?
The north elevation.
The north elevation.
This plate height is considerably higher than that plate height, which ends up with these openings not having the same portion in their space that this does. And so,
Sorry, Don, I just wanted to...
the question is, it loses a lot of this
The charm.
romance, I'll call it, because of all of this plaster over here, and this. I particularly don't care for windows that have balconies attached outside them when it's obvious it should be a door. And I'm wondering if you should have a balcony extend under a window when you could just cut it back and have a much more effective elevation, just because Henry shows it that way. These are, really fine things, or minute, I guess you'd say. But this building is a lot higher than that building, and you're stretching it way out and losing a lot of the proportional charm and romance that is in here, and that is very important in Spanish colonial revival architecture. But I don't know why the plate height is so much higher. I'm sure there's a very good reason for it, and how to proportionalize the openings that to make up for that, all that additional plaster, I don't know.
I think it's because Henry thought it looked better at 7/8 scale.
What is your plate height in those keys?
I think what we would need to explore is whether we can reduce the space that we've given to the mechanical system.
Oh, yeah. It's high.
It's a 10-foot plate.
Yeah.
My God.
Huge.
It's a 10-foot 6 plate,
Oh.
and it's a 9-foot ceiling.
I don't think this is trivial, Mr. Sharp.
I didn't say it was.
Oh, you said your comments were trivial and minute.
Well,
Well, I do have a motion on the table.
Regarding the motion, I was making the motion, reading the tea leaves, thinking that not so much to attach the comments to the motion, but that these would be things to respond to when coming back for final. So the minutes of the meeting. So we would give preliminary based as submitted, with these additional comments to be responded to from the minutes of the hearing.
The problem with that, Commissioner Schellenberger, is that we're locked in. If we give them preliminary, we're locked in on the mass
We are
bulk and
locked
scale.
Not if they don't respond and they did to the meeting minutes.
this portion of the first floor has a 12-foot plate height and a 10-foot ceiling height. And then it becomes a 10-foot 6 plate height and an 8-foot 6 ceiling height.
Yeah, that's partly because we're dealing with the change in grade as it goes across.
Oh, no, I understand that part. I don't know if you need almost 2 feet for your ductwork in relatively small rooms.
I do have a motion on the table. I thought did I have a second on that?
I think Sharp.
I was
Chair,
seconding it
yeah.
with comments, but
Commissioner Sharp seconded, but the motion still is not really clear. Did you want those comments, or do you just want the preliminary as submitted? Commissioner Schellenberger?
I just wanted it as submitted.
All right, who would second that motion? That motion fails. I have a second motion to float.
Do I dare try?
Sure, try, Mr. Sue.
I will make a motion for a 2-week continuance with the applicant to, this is not a preliminary approval, to restudy the fenestration on the west elevation and the east elevation to more match the Lenny plan, specifically the massing, to study the plate heights, to reduce that massing, also to revert back to the plaster guardrail on the south elevation.
here, one more.
And to go back to the wrought iron guardrail on the south elevation in the middle of the unit.
So I assume you're also going to want them to look at the proportions of the north and south elevations if you're going to touch the east and west.
Yeah, you're right, Madam Chair. The north and the south elevations also need studying with the fenestration and the massing. That's going to be resolved when they study the plate height.
Exactly.
But I don't feel it's ready for preliminary approval based on that plate height issue. The fountain is moot at this point. It's not important.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that?
The no preference regarding the fountain on the north elevation.
That you can leave that comment, please.
Leave that out.
No. Madam Chair, I say just leave that comment in there.
All right, leave the comment in there? Fine. Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I hope that one doesn't come
You
back.
opposed?
Wait, no.
Oh, that motion carries. Now we can talk about the schedule, Ms. Kennedy.
Yeah.
We were continuing for the long anyway.
I think you have 3 more items.
Because I asked a million times.
Okay.
Yes.
We thought we had the right.
Well, just put on hold, but the lady didn't like the sound of a whisper at her property line.
It's up to you. Whatever you'd like. I'm here for the whole time, so whenever you're ready to.
The next is concept review for 1900 Les Wayne El Encanto. This is requested a first concept review for the back of the house cottages, utilities distribution facility, and the underground parking structure in the northwest corner is approved by the Planning Commission September 10th. Oh, I'm sorry. I just skipped right over. This item is for the final approval of the historic harbor as requested. The harbor received preliminary approval. Is this another lapsed preliminary?
Yes, you would
Okay.
need preliminary again.
It's a lapsed preliminary. We're back again. Yes, this one should go. This one,
What you've seen in mine.
this one I think should not be changed. Right.
No, they just figured out how to build new columns that look
Yes.
just like Anne thank you. But thanks for the offer. Now, if it was the M&Ms, I'd be all over it. And have sugar this late in the day.
Do you have the minutes? No, we're responding to, no, we're responding exactly to the direction you gave us last time we were here at the Arbor.
This one should be.
We were asking for final. Well, I hope so.
Oh, it's Min. Hello, Min.
Good to see you guys.
We've all aged 2 years.
A few more gray hairs, Suzanne.
God.
You don't have any gray. I'm not complaining.
Well, it's because it's falling out. It's just falling out.
That's the other alternative, yeah. Okay, will you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, ma'am.
Ben Pham, representing ownership.
Okay.
thought that was pretty
Trish Allen with Susanna Illich Planning and Permitting.
Thank you.
Katie, introduce yourself.
Katie O'Reilly Rogers, landscape architect.
Okay. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the last time we had this, do you wish to?
I was just going to say that I looked at the drawings with Kathleen Kennedy this morning, and one thing you can see about these drawings is they're very impressive in terms of a restoration plan where they've actually got each brick in the column denoted so that you can make sure that when they reconstruct it, it's exactly like it was. And it's also in the plans, I believe, somewhere it said that they're going to leave one column up through the whole restoration so that we always have that one reference point that'll actually be a physical reference point. But the plans are amazingly detailed, and I want to give them kudos for such a good set of plans.
Thank you. I think it says here that the Arbor received preliminary approval on January 25th, 06, but I have comments in August 08 regarding concept review. I will read those comments. Continued indefinitely with the following comments. Preserve the existing vines and plants. Maintain the same amount of vine coverage and coordinate the footings with the planters. Consider reconstructing the masonry columns with an interior masonry core instead of the proposed steel so it is done in a more traditional manner. Request an investigation by a structural engineer as to the possibility of retaining as many of the existing columns through the reconstruction method. Consider probable water intrusion in the design. Provide ventilation to the interior of the columns considering the construction method, and there should be flashing of the wood members, bench, and beams. So I don't quite know how that worked.
We're responding to those comments.
Yeah, so I don't understand how it got a preliminary approval in January 25th, 06.
It did, when you were looking at many of the other projects related to the 2004 plan, it was included in one group with that. But those are the most recent comments, so those are the ones you should pay attention to.
Okay. Yeah.
This, I guess, I'd like to address basically the continued comments that was given to the Arbor in our last review. We considered basically the framing and or the reconstruction of the Arbor instead of what we had proposed previously as an interior steel frame. We went ahead and revised that to basically a filled grout system or a solid filled column. Basically will allow us to also tie into a pier system, or the structural engineer gave us various options to basically keep the wisteria roots and such in place where they were clinging direct to the column. So basically, changing it to solid columns, and there was questions regarding the flashing of the column connection into the or the trellis connections into the columns, which what we've done around some of the buildings is we've provided a copper flashing around the attachment point that's buried within, and leaving that slightly recessed so that could be grouted over and hidden.
Cover it up with the stairs.
But basically that's a reaction to that. And that eliminated basically any venting concerns that we had in the hollow columns in the last proposal. But in the request to investigate the possibility of retaining as many of the existing columns, that wasn't, we asked the structural engineer to consider that, which he didn't think that'd be prudent, obviously, because as we take each one of these down, right now they're not seismically stable in that sense. So what we propose with the pier footing, there's no grade beam or anything, nor without taking them down can we stabilize any remaining columns if we don't basically rebuild them from the ground up. So that wasn't a feasible option that he was willing to recommend.
Then there was a comment on Alice's report.
And And in terms of, there was a comment based on Alex's report to, and I believe with direction from the committee, to save one column to use as a template for the rest of the columns as we're building. And we reviewed that with Alex and selected a column that we would save throughout for the last, basically, column to rebuild, so that we have one standing that can be referenced back to at all times.
So it says consider pictures. Groups it up so they can see the pictures.
Why was that one so special?
I think it was still in rather good order, and it also represented a connection detail for the bench as well as the vine's adjacency to it. So.
Really complicated vines.
It was a plant thing.
Wisteria can be
Right in.
Yes,
Save
that
the
was
best for
good.
last.
Could I just second that we did go and want one that did have the bench and seat connector. And we thought, that wisteria is so huge, it might be best just to leave that till the last.
That's the seismic.
As well, as
That's the
well
only thing holding it together right now.
I think you're right, Carmina.
Thank you. Any more? Okay.
Sure.
So just as we did with the plant material, we did a photo documentation of the paving of the site. Most of the arbor area is really lovely and, as you can see here, intact. There are areas where it's infill, and those areas we will be pulling out and putting old brick back in. What we've decided to do in terms of construction is pull out the offensive bricks, put a 6-inch layer of sand over the entire rectangular brick pathway system, and do the reconstruction of the columns, because the thought of pulling all this out, storing it, and trying to get it back looking like this is, we'll never make it. We'll just never make it. So that's the intent pathway system, and this shows the various locations, paths, etc. The other thing that this helps with is there are existing vine pockets in front of each one of those columns. So now we don't have to hope that the contractor remembers to form that up for me. One more. So just as we did with the rest of the project in terms of doing a plant assessment, we did an assessment of what we think was probably around the lily pond and the garden, the lawn right around it. We are saving probably 80% of the wisteria. Down in this corner, there's some Philadelphus that's magnificent in the spring. It takes over the wisteria. It's the white, and the fragrance is beyond belief. So we're adding a few more of those on this west side. And outside of that, we're keeping it really quiet. The color scheme is basically green and white so that the brides can have whatever color wedding they like. The guys have to just go along. These are the two big twin pines in front of cottage 14 that will remain. And then this currently is just a big overgrown jungle where we think people tried to create a contemporary like privet type hedge, which is hardly a historic plant material. So we're just going to come in here and do more of what's in this garden that's remaining. So it'll be separated, but it won't be walled off. And that there's also, just about in the center, there is a relatively new urn that's a memorial to Eric Frieden. And we're going to relocate it on the property, but the idea of having a memorial urn where people are getting married seems to be a little... And it's not historic. It was, he just passed away 5 years ago, so it was placed there at that time. And we told Karen, his widow, that we are going to relocate it, and she's okay with that.
All right.
And that's it. This is the Waterfall Garden above it that's basically staying the same. The only thing that's changing in Waterfall is right now you can walk from here through a mossy, slimy brick swale into the garden, and we're going to cut off that connection so you'll come into the Waterfall Garden as a separate experience.
Thank you. Anything else? I'm going to ask for public comment. And that would be... Did I have a public comment? Item number 5, Kellum.
No, that's fine.
I didn't even
Kellum to Forest. Let's see where I'm at. So back when this was being discussed years ago, seems like years ago, I invited a preservationist friend and who's a restoration expert and has been involved by the name of Steve Schrader. He has been involved in restoration throughout Southern California, mainly, and has been very successful in preserving green and green estates, houses and estates in Pasadena. And he has various techniques of how to preserve wood and brick and other things. I recommended him to, I asked him to look at come up and to El Encanto, that was before I think you closed it, and look at the pergola, and which he did, and felt that it could be saved. It did not have to be torn down. And this being a very historic structure and probably one of the main features of El Encanto, at least the garden portion of El Encanto, I don't see why a pergola that's already covered with vines has to be seismically retrofitted. Who is it going to fall on? And with the vines, how is it going to fall anyway? So I think I would hope maybe you, before you tear it down and create something that may not look like the historic structure. I mean, I'm waiting to see what the main building is going to look like, but it's certainly not going to look like what was there. So I think every effort should be made to see whether this historic structure can be saved rather than torn down and I hardly say rebuilt. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mr. Martinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I think Mr. DeForest had some good comments, and my concerns, since I saw what was presented there, is I've been involved in some of these 1900, 1920 reconstructions, and it's very difficult to find the original bricks because they're sand cast usually, they're flashed, they're different dimensions than anything that we can buy now. They would have to be actually probably fabricated back down south using very old methods, very expensive. But my concern is that they save every brick they can. But I remember the El Encanto. I stayed there. I saw the bricks. They're very old. A lot of them are just disintegrating. So there's not much that you can do regarding that. And as far as the wood, that was just the brick issue. Structural issues, I think, are going to have to be studied more. I'm having a little bit of difficulty seeing someone showing you a reinforced concrete column that's rather fairly thin. And I remember the columns there being much thicker. And, of course, as you may remember, those of you that have gone there, a lot of the bricks were done in the very old craftsman style where they were just literally stepping stones for the rats to get up to the top of the vines. So, this is, I think, very good, is that you are being able to reconstruct these, but I have a structural issue regarding that. And finally, when it comes to the wood, someone's going to have to be very careful when they inspect these things. Some of it looks like it may have gone beyond help without seeing a lot of epoxy being shot into these things. And so if they are going to reconstruct, the only two wood species that I think that should be used is either redwood or cedar. And the old way of doing this was net dimensions. That means you're going to be getting some rough cedar or redwood from up north, and it's going to have to be dense, grain, and free of heart centers. That's very important. So if that is the issue, and I think that should be part of your considerations, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Martinson. That's the end of public comment. Do we have any questions from the Commission? Yes.
Since the last time we saw it.
Only in the methods in which we present to reconstruct the columns, basically.
Thank you.
Changing from concrete to...
But basically, it's the same as it was, except
Right.
for that. Thank you.
I have a question. When you're having this brick done down south or whatever, what measures are taken to make those different from a standard brick in a pallet? Do you know that?
For the paving or for the columns?
For both, really, if you need replacements.
For the paving,
the columns, you're using the existing bricks. Right. Is that correct? In the same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But for the paving, is there anything special about tumbling them, or?
For the paving, we will not be having any newly manufactured bricks. We'll use the old stuff on site, or we have a source for old, reclaimed, reused brick that was manufactured in the 30s and 40s and has
And
been.
they match the
and they have. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same era. So they reclaim it out of old buildings and old projects and store it till someone like me comes along and says, I'm willing to pay twice as much for something that looks that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Have you looked into seismically upgrading the existing columns in hopes that you could support them somehow and not have to tear them down?
Well, it's just we have, but the problem is right now, as it sits, it's been condemned by the city. We have to corner it off for any public to access it. It's falling over. So to really to say we can save these columns, I don't. It just doesn't. I don't see that it benefits. But we have had various structural engineers take a look at it, and it's all pointed out the same. That really it's better to just seismically stabilize them as a whole new system. But as they sit right now, there's no integrity in them.
Can I clarify your answer? You said it's better to do what you're doing, but there was a possibility of...
Well, no.
Please clarify that part.
I'm sorry. That they stand basically with no integrity in them, in the sense that they're not seismically braced as they stand except for the wisteria, as the vines. But I don't think that's a structural substitution to.
No, of course not. But you can ask a question two ways. You can either ask the structural engineer what he thinks about the structure, or you can ask him to provide a way of reusing these, and what would he do to not demolish and have to rebuild every one of these columns, and he would come up with an answer that would be seismically okay.
Point taken. I can't say we've posed the question as to how he would go about preserving the columns. That's what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
The last time this came up, when I think Don made the same point, one thing the Commission asked you to possibly consider is to do every other column, so that you have a seismically fit column, and then the original and seismically retrofit an original. And did you guys look into that possibility?
We did, but I guess his recommendation was that you couldn't you couldn't really, or he can't assure basically the integrity of the columns that we leave behind are untouched, versus the ones that if it's every other one. I mean, if those fell down the next, in the next, I guess, earthquake, if you have it, or shake or things like that. I mean, to the client, he's not done any justice to that. I mean, then, we've gone in there and basically provided him some kind of a Band-Aid for him to come back and redo the next, 10 or 12 columns after that. So he wouldn't advise against it, or he would advise against that method.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Maybe this is a question for Alex. Maybe.
Come on down.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes, I wanted to ask, in your view of this new structural techniques, what do you think will be the impact on the resource, and especially the way you're going to reconstruct the brick back? Do you think this is a viable, meets the interior standards method of doing this?
Commissioner Murray, this was addressed. I've written many letter addendums, and that was a letter addendum that I wrote to your commission that was accepted. And I said that it met the standards, partly in a sense because the existing brick was going to be reused, and I think it was almost each column's bricks were going to be used in that column, and that the wood seating would be done, and I can assure you that the owners will do what Mr. Martinson said in the sense of full dimension lumber. They have done that already on Building 16, and so I can vouch for the fact that they've got full dimension lumber. They have etched it the way the exact old way was. And so from that point of view, and realizing that we started out with the least invasive, which was, all right, seismically stabilize each one. And then because this is open to the public, that you have to do it at a much higher standard than if it were just somebody's private arbor. And it just seemed to make sense and not have, it will have an impact taking it down, but putting them back exactly as they were. And particularly, we took your suggestion, which went with when you reviewed that report of mine, to keep one column in place, which made a lot of sense. And that's why we put that on the drawings, that this is the one that's going to be kept. So we can use that as a template. And so from my point of view, that met the Secretary of the Interior standards. Almost, it would be more for reconstruction as opposed to rehabilitation. It would be reconstruction standards.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to again just point out that these restoration plans include actual scale drawings of the column with each brick being shown and the correct mortar distance and whatnot. So I could be convinced that they could put them back and it'll look exactly like it did before they took it down.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Commission? Comments from the Commission? You're not a commissioner.
Madam, Mr. DeForest, you need to come up to the microphone.
Okay. Can we have comments from the Commission, please? Yes, Mr. Schallenberg.
A minor thing, but having done some of this type of seating before, would it violate the restoration to cant the seat back?
Are you talking about this?
90 degrees doesn't work for seating.
Isn't
They are
it?
canted
It's
back.
canted. It does.
They are
have-
canted back.
The seat or the back?
The seat or the back?
The back.
The back.
The
is
existing ones are. We will change
There's
it.
a photograph there somewhere.
canted. Well, let's look at the photos because it doesn't min, isn't it,
No, I
canted?
think it's actually
The existing
because they
ones?
slot quite vertically.
Oh, that's that.
Here it is, right?
But if they're canted, you
They're canted.
Aren't they canted?
The lower right-hand photograph on ADO 06.
Did you see that one? It's painted, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Did you see? Did you see on ADO 06?
ADO 06,
Look at that one, please.
lower right-hand corner.
80.
I'm sorry.
So do the drawings,
The drawing has to reflect.
The restoration, reconstruction drawing,
You're saying that the correct
yes,
drawing.
yes,
of how to build it.
yes.
Show that.
That's what they're going to be looking at.
Fine.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One other possible thing you might want to consider is if there's concern about how the columns are going to be taken apart, that we have the historian be on site while several of the columns are being done so that she can actually monitor the process of them taking it down to make sure that it's going to come down without any issues. And then at least you maybe give you some more security and feeling how this is going to be handled.
Thank you. So would some, yes, Ms. Murray? Would someone like to make a motion
Yeah, I was going to make a motion for final approval.
with the drawings to modify to reflect the existing cant of the
I'm
back
sorry,
of the
yes,
seat?
that's correct.
And you wish
to have
to,
the historian present during
Have the
this.
historian present.
Pardon me?
The motion was too fast for me. I didn't catch
She wanted to make a final approval with the drawings to be modified to reflect the existing angled back
Of the bench.
to be recreated, and to have a historian on site to monitor the, how many columns do you want to?
That's, I'd say maybe 6. Something.
6 of the columns.
6 of the columns as they are taken down.
May I have a second for that?
Madam Chair, we also
Yes.
don't have a preliminary approval yet for this.
All right, we don't have a preliminary, well, then the motion will reflect that we reinstate the preliminary with those comments and move towards a final approval as well for that. So do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Okay. The last item would be the concept review for the back of the house cottages, utilities distribution facility, and the underground parking structure.
Oh, we have it on the exhibit that you submitted, right?
Yeah.
That gets buried in. I'll take the extra set.
I'll give you this, Trish. I just want to look at some of this. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if there's 2.
Jake's just looking at it. And the other one's tucked behind. Craig, you can't take that home with you.
I know, well, for all of us.
Do you have the color rendering? Are we in recess, Madam Chair?
Pardon? No, I think you should be moving right along because we are behind. Yeah, but
Now we have a set.
Let him put the.
You always fight him.
Oh, cool.
On both counts, but not yes and on
Yes, that should be the color for the arbor. Yes. Okay. So you want to give me a color ones or not?
Well,
This is. So we're just waiting for that. There's one in color.
I'll collaborate.
Watch out, this is the.
oh, another. Yes.
Can we get the color one here, perhaps?
Okay, we don't want this one. That's fine because this one's got us sticking up. Okay, be careful. There's a staple that's really kind of
stapled here.
killing. Yes. All right.
was going to make an introductory comment before you. Go for it. As soon as Suzette's ready.
Okay, are we ready to go? Let's go.
Are you ready for our names for the record? Or?
Yes. Will you give your names for the record? Oh, my God.
Trish Allen with Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting.
Jim Lefevre with Gensler.
Katie O'Reilly Rogers, Landscape Architect.
Madam Chair, before you leaf through our volume of minutes, as staff mentioned when we started our first item this afternoon, this corner has been revised since you last looked at it. You last looked at a surface parking lot with back of house floor area below the parking lot. We subsequently went to Planning Commission, secured that approval, went through an appeal process, and then redesigned this corner as directed by City Council and worked with neighboring property owners that had appealed that and reached an agreement. So what we did was flip it and put the parking underneath and back of house cottages up on top. And one thing I wanted to mention before we got going, so my point being is that the minutes
They're irrelevant?
are irrelevant. They don't reflect what you're going to look at today. So we decided before, that would have been so much quicker. But I kind of wanted to give that context too. And we did have a meeting inviting the neighbors that live in the close proximity to the hotel site and worked with the Riviera Homeowners Association and had a meeting 2 weeks ago on April 29th, letting the neighbors know that construction was going to remobilize, that we were going to be coming back to the Historic Landmarks Commission to complete the architectural approvals before going into the building permit process, and let them know that our desired schedule would be starting today and for about a 3.5 to 4 month period. And I know we might be talking about the schedule a little bit more. It's what I call the theoretical schedule. We know it's just dependent on the information we present and whether we're satisfying the standards of the commission. So we did have that meeting a couple of weeks ago. We alerted folks that we would be coming in and having reviews and starting this process again. And we did make, we discussed with the Riviera Homeowners Association President, Jim Knight, providing monthly updates using the association as our spokesperson to convey information to the neighborhood so that folks would know what's happening in terms of construction activities and also the hearing process, and understanding that as we're going through these review cycles, there will be plans available for the public to review here at the counter to prepare and come and make their public comment. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Jim.
Thank you. Okay, just again reiterating the notion of looking at things on a quadrant by quadrant basis. This is the bulk of the work we're going to see here. We have included some drawings of Cottage 29 for reference in this package, but we're not really talking about 29 at this point. And in fact, these drawings that you're seeing here today are very little changed from the drawings that were presented at the last planning department hearing. Essentially, this is to bring you folks up to speed on what it is that's proposing, what's changed, and how we plan to achieve this at a pretty conceptual level, and you'll see that's reflected in the drawings. I'm going to spring one drawing on you, which we just got, just because I think it's going to help us understand what we're looking at. And first thing I want to say is color is a real dangerous thing. Oh. Don't pay much attention to the color.
Well, Henry's down to only 2 markers, so.
Yes.
No, that's not the green.
Yeah.
Or the tile.
And really the important thing about this is the intention of this drawing was to show the architecture, and to that end, clearly the eucalyptus trees in the foreground have been minimized almost out of existence, and this orange surface is not at all what's intended, and I'm sure Katie will explain that to you in considerable detail. What we really have done is we've stripped all the vegetation away from the architecture just so that you can begin to get some sense of how this is going to work. As Trish has indicated, when you last looked at this, what you were looking at was basically a surface parking lot. There was a little bit of architecture at this end that included some mechanical equipment. And then there was various access points along this side to get into what was essentially a back of house office, utility, laundry space down below, with a couple windows maybe here and a couple skylights. That's all gone. Now what we have, and we'll walk through it in a little bit and plan in a minute, but we have a below-grade parking garage. We have 3 relatively small cottages sitting on top of the facility. These will be occupied primarily by the offices of the hotel management people. There will be a staff locker room in here, we think, and the other feature that's sort of important and prominent is that the cooling tower for the project is now buried in a vault underground, but it does air out through the top of this one cottage. And it has to go somewhere. Just for reference, again, this is Cottage 29, which we will be talking about. It had been approved before. I'm sure that approval's void at this point. It will be changed in a couple of minor ways due to reorientation in connection to this project, but substantially we're going to proceed with it as previously reviewed. This is Cottage 16, which has been previously reviewed. It's one of the historic buildings that's preserved and is in the process of being renovated at this point. So we'll put this out of the way. And, in this particular case, because you... This is just...
It's really thick paper. I did the same thing.
Yeah, take it out. It's just one. It's just one. There's another. Ah, here it is. Okay. In this particular case, because you are looking at it for the first time, we've really made pretty good effort to sort of paper the area with elevations of the existing buildings. So just, again, so you get some context of what it is we're looking at. But clearly the most important part of it is this piece here that is what we're actually proposing to do. Here again, a site plan, a little bit drilling into it a little bit deeper. This is the Waterfall Garden that we've talked about before and that we're preserving. This is the arbor we've just finished talking about, Cottage 16, which is nearly done. Cottage 29 we're proposing. The main building is down where you're sitting, Madam Chairman. Mm-hmm. This is the corner of Mission Ridge in Alvarado. What was originally on this site was 3 small craftsman cottages. And I don't want to characterize the square footage, similar square footages. And a chunk of surface parking was here. It was just basically a patch of earth and gravel. And an informal drive. This is the main entry circle. The main entry of the circle with the historic sign is out here. Okay, below grade, we now have the parking garage. You'll see that we've dog-legged this side a little bit, and that's to protect the root ball of the eucalyptus trees here. So we've managed to jostle some parking around between this parking structure and another parking structure you'll see in the northeast corner a little bit later to get the required parking in. Really, in this level, it's a valet parking system. You do see ADA spaces. That's because even though it is valet parking, we're required to have. There is, in this area, a vault for the cooling towers that we've talked about. The cooling tower vault actually sits a story below, essentially, the garage. It's in a subgrade vault. The intake to the cooling tower is through grates in the floor of the garage, and it exhausts vertically up this way, and we'll track the exhaust in a minute. The only other uses down here are a little bit of storage space, which is basically just recaptured space under the Cottage 29, and a space for some boilers and pumps that are associated with the utility system of the property. Just a word on the utility system. The idea with the utility system is to centralize as much of the mechanical system in a sort of a quiet and contained way, rather than to get into a situation where we're going to dot the whole site with the local package units. And this really was about preserving the quality of the project, preserving the acoustic quality of the project, and the visual quality of the project is not having to sort of camouflage a whole bunch of air-cooled units out on the property. what do we think these things are going to look like? So this is, to avoid the problems we had on 12, I guess we've taken the Henry Lenny drawings and really blown them up big. And what you see here, this is an elevation, or let me go this way. This is the elevation that you'll see from from the west, and I'm just looking for the road name, and I can't. Eldorado. Thank you. So you see the three cottages we've romantically named 37, 38, and 39. And this again is the two office buildings, employee buildings. This will have probably some office space in it. It also has the duct for the cooling tower in it. This is Cottage 29, seen behind it. Cottage 29 is a two-story structure. All of these are clearly one-story structures. This is Cottage 16, which is sort of part two-story, part one-story. The two-story portion is toward this project. So this is the Cottage 16, two-story end here. Cottage 29 proposed, 37, 38, 39. It's really this thick paper. This is looking at the three cottages from the north view, showing them again in relationship to Cottage 29, the north elevation of Cottage 29. And they're just sort of stacked up. So this is the northmost, the middle cottage, the southmost. The idea here again is clearly to stay firmly in the vernacular of the project, recognizing the fact that these are really utility buildings. They're housing offices. There are no guests in this area. This is south elevations. You see the south elevation of Cottage 37 at the top, and roughly its juxtaposition to Cottage 16. It's lower. The middle cottage, the south cottage, which this is the one you'll see actually coming out of the main building, and again seeing what you'll see of Cottage 29 again from the same view. Again, kind of in the same relationship. Cottage 29 vertically is the floor plate is about where Cottage 38 is. The garage you'll see in the section slopes to the south, so this is a little lower. The one on the north is going to be a little higher. As we get a little further into this, we'll get some topography. We don't have it in this set, but generally speaking, this is a little bit of a bold section, so even from the street, this is down from the street. And I think that the one thing that actually looking, this is the south elevation of Cottage 37. If you look at the north elevation, you're going to see that part of that north elevation is probably going to be retained earth a bit because of the topography.
Okay.
Okay, and then just for reference, this is Cottage 29. Again, I think it's pretty much as you've seen it. There have been a couple changes as a result of the pushing around, and we will bring this back to you and we'll talk about it in detail. The biggest change being that previously the entry was on the east side. We've now moved it to the west side, and that's just because we're trying to preserve the paths in the Waterfall Garden.
Excuse me, can I ask, are we supposed to be doing anything to make a decision? You're just showing this? Okay.
This is for context.
Okay,
this is,
great.
Yeah, this is for 29. And
overall, this is concept.
yeah, and this is again because we really want to make a commitment that when we're asking you to consider something, we consider it within the whole context.
Thank you.
And then just this is probably getting even broader than we want, but
yes,
just to do it, this is the elevation of 16. So our project is again over here.
Mm-hmm.
This is 15 and 14, which are the two cottages that face this project across the garden. So these are the two closest craftsman projects to the basically Spanish revival flavored back of house photos.
Thank you.
Now flip all the way to the front so I can
Back
talk
to the
about
plant stuff. Next time we'll just print it on planks of wood. Okay. That's it. Let's sell it to the homeless after we're done.
Hello again. Do I need a microphone?
Yeah.
Right. Sheet L1.0, Mr. Sooting. Could you just go out and have a cigarette? No. I could smell it. This is the tree preservation plan for this corner of the property. There was an olive tree here that had previously been approved to be removed, that is gone, Lord knows. There are a number, there's a date plan, can't read upside down, date palm in this corner that is to be removed, partially for visibility and partially for fire. There's an acacia to be removed, also for fire. And then we come into the eucalyptus field along here. And we don't really want to get into the trees today because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We just want you to note that the trees that the arborist report when it comes in recommend removing will be removed. The ones he recommends staying will stay. That's what the condition of approval from Planning Commission and Council was, and that's what this says, and that's what we're abiding by. How's that? For non-committal. Although this says preliminary landscape plan, it's actually a conceptual landscape plan. The intent, this is the outline of the parking garage below. The intent with these three cottages is to try to make them look like they are nestled into the property, which is not always easy on top of a parking garage. Mission Village, we have a minimum of 3 feet from the topping slab to the terrace level, so I can do it. Here we have, as of right now, a minimum of 12 inches, but we have to work with structural and civil to find out. But the intent is that the entire top would be planted. There'll be some turf in some areas, there'll be low ground cover in others, and then we will be building 30 to 36 inch high, I don't know if I got heights on these, stone raised planters against elevations of the building that can handle it, so I can get 2.5 or 3 feet more of dirt plus what's right over the parking garage, so we can get some trees. They're going to have to be small trees. They're drawn over the structure, which of course in a high fire zone I can't have, but at least we can get some height of greenery in here. We will have screen shrubbery against the side of where the parking garage is. As long as I'm 25 feet from a building, I can have screen shrubbery, because they don't consider the wall of a parking garage a combustible structure. Well, I guess it could melt, but there will be the existing eucalyptus in here, and they will be augmented with a tall skyline tree such as the London plane tree, the bloodgood. But again, I have to use trees that I'd rather put taller trees like Melaleuca that would have the character of the eucalyptus, but they have to meet the high fire zone plant list in there.
Why don't you move the mic a little closer? I'm having trouble hearing back there.
That's okay. That's all right. The only other thing to note is that the main pathway that used to come up and decimate the Waterfall Garden has been relocated between Building 29 and these cottages. It does go over the top of the parking garage, so we have some raised planters in this area and here. At the edge of the parking garage, I'm going to do a 42-inch high, where it's above grade, 42-inch high boxwood hedge and an iron railing sandwiched inside of it for safety. But I don't think we want that edge to be 42 inches higher at the driveway or that southern elevation. Screening of the building from up above. This is already under construction and approved. And that is about it. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I do have a question. It really relates to the architecture more than this, but it shows here. How are you ventilating your parking garage?
The parking garage, again, in negotiation with the neighbors, and as we work through the problems of how to ventilate the garage, the desire was to keep the ventilation as far into the project and away from the street as possible. So what we've essentially done is we've got a path that collects along the back, comes down to here, and vents through a structure that will look a lot like a chimney on the side of this building. So it'll be vented above the roof of Cottage 38. And here again, the challenge, it's similar to the cooling tower challenge. It's a little smaller distance. It's sort of 10 feet above grade, 10 feet from the property line, 10 feet from operable windows. So we'll run a chimney up 10 plus feet and dump the garage house there.
And how high above natural grade or finished grade here is the slab, roughly?
Roughly. I think we're expecting to see about 5 feet at the corner, and it's pretty much gone.
And that will not be open for ventilation?
There's the opening.
I certainly understand that will be, but
no.
You won't be forced into...
No.
And that one vent will take care of, as far as you know now, I know this is preliminary.
Our mechanical engineer has looked at it and has preliminarily given us a size, and he says that'll work. It's not a big garage.
Well, okay.
So.
It seems as though it's awful small for the amount of garage that you're having to vent with that. But that's not our problem. But it could become one.
Yeah, and I think if it did, what you'd see is probably more depth to this shape.
No, that's...
and it would still, we tried to maintain the expression of a stucco chimney.
Yeah, I just didn't want to see a bunch of vents around the perimeter there.
No,
I know, that's why I used the landscape plan.
We've had a lot of discussions about that, and we're pretty clear on our mandate here. So.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure.
If we're done with the presentation,
Question.
I want to do public comment. You go to the bottom then, Kellen.
Okay, good. I have to stay.
The first question will be from Mr. Martinson for item number 6. After that will be Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Now, I have no questions regarding this part. I think I've indicated that I had several portions of number 6, but I have no comment regarding this, the northwest corner development. I'm still waiting.
This is what item number 6 is the back of the house, cottages, northwest corner.
And you go on and on. You've only just reviewed the back of the house, cottages, and nothing else.
Is there more to be
Mission
reviewed?
Village,
No, there is nothing more to be.
It's not on today.
This
It
is
isn't?
purely what you just heard and saw.
Just this package, right?
Just that package. Well, why is all of this on the agenda?
That's the entire project description. Underneath, if you look further down, it says first concept review and what is being described now.
Okay.
Granted, it is a little bit confusing.
All right.
It is.
Granted.
That gets repeated every single agenda.
Right,
and
okay.
It's very confusing.
Well, let me, since I have listened and what was going on here, the concern that I would have regarding the northwest corner is probably what most of the neighbors in the entire Riviera area have regarding the large eucalyptus trees. They're divided. It's a fire ladder, or they're historic landmark trees. And I think, they're both justified in their concerns. But my concern, since I've heard what was going on here, is how much is that subterranean garage going to cut into the root structures of those eucalyptuses? I really think that that's a key issue, because if you remember Orpit Park just last year, there was a eucalyptus there that had part of its roots cut off in the park, and it fell over. And this is very of concern to me. I'm not an arborist or a landscape architect, but I've been involved in a lot of these things, and it's very important that whatever goes down there along Alvarado Place is that what happens when you run into a 10 or a 12-inch root. We're having that problem right now downtown in La Arcata. We have giant eucalyptus trees that are pushing their roots right up against our wall, and they're pushing it over. I mean, this is of concern, and what happens along Alvarado Place is going to be very important for those trees. And I think it has to be considered. And hopefully when they start their excavation, someone will be there, an arborist or a landscape architect, to verify if there is going to be danger to some of those trees along the Alvarado Place, that it be taken care of and addressed immediately, not wait for like what happened up at the corner. One fell over, if you recall that too. That was just about 4 or 5 months ago. Thank you very much.
Mr. Leslie, and after that, Mrs. Leslie, I'm assuming?
We're talking about the next 2
items. The trees are not what we want to discuss.
Well, no, this is all about the entire presentation, the buildings and the landscape.
Can I just pass to the next?
So you don't wish to speak at all?
Not about the trees or the concept is fine.
Okay. This is the only thing that is going to be discussed.
Maybe I don't understand your...
I think I can help. Let me just interject one moment. A lot of the people in the Riviera wanted to come down and see these plans. They were not allowed to see them. Had they come in and looked at them, they would have realized, well, where is everything else? Well, it's not there. It's not in the packet. I would have liked to have done that, too.
And why weren't these available?
Actually, the plans have been available since they were submitted last week at the
Okay.
counter.
Well, I think there's some people that have been told no, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Jan Marco van Uret, and after that, Joanna van Uret.
Dear Board, dear Commissioner, thank you very much. Jan Marco von Uert. I also speak on behalf of my wife, Joanna, and Mr. and Mrs. Nazarian, who are unfortunately not available. We love the plan. It's a wonderful concept. I hope you can expedite the process and see that there was a lot of work involved to make the neighbors happy. And the eucalyptus trees, as beautiful they seem to some people, as dangerous they are to others. And we just had a tragic incident where luckily nobody got hurt, but one came down over the intersection and took out 3 power poles in the middle of the night, went right at the stop sign down. So if a car during traffic going to Marymount School or to the daily routine, usually cars are always stopped there, one car, and that would have been a great loss. So there was no wind involved. It was quiet, and that tree just came down out of nowhere. So we truly can appreciate the landscape plan proposed and to those eucalyptus trees being removed and replaced with adequate trees. One personal opinion, the day palm in the corner, if it could stay, I think it would be a very nice feature. That at least something would be kept. But thank you very much. It looks great.
Thank you. Kellum DeForest. No details.
We should just get you an honorary chair.
Or move the mic.
Yeah, right.
That'd be easier. That'd be really nice.
Okay. So on. Kellum DeForest. I just wanted to point out on the eucalyptus trees, they're very, they were part of the original design intent of Mr. Eaton, the landscape architect at the early on in the history of the El Encanto, and they were to provide the tall skyline trees were to provide a verticality that would contrast to the horizontal nature of the buildings. Now maybe it's not going to be as horizontal as it was in Eaton's day, but that's why they're there, and I would request possibly that there may be more vertical trees. They don't have to be eucalyptus, but be installed. I know it's very difficult to put, you can't put trees over the parking lot, so I don't know what the trees on the Mission Ridge are going to be, but I encourage skyline trees. Also, I think I heard where is the vault, the pump that's going to supply heat and air conditioning for the entire complex going to be? Oh, okay.
Right underneath.
Is it
Underground.
underground? Okay, thank you. That's because that was such a bone of contention, and by being underground, it'll be silenced. It won't make noise 24 hours a day. I mean, it'll make noise there. Will it be insulated enough so the noise will not be heard on Mission Ridge or by the or even by the guests of the hotel? Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Leslie, please.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come
Sure.
back. My question, thank you all. In this, your concept review, it says that we were going to discuss today the realignment of the sandstone wall at the main driveway entrance and a new trash enclosure. Oh, excuse me. First was a swimming pool with a fitness center below, realignment of a sandstone wall at the driveway entrance and a new trash enclosure, screening gate, retaining wall, and landscaping. Is that part of today?
No, and I'll just point out, this is the whole project description, this part, but the bold is what was actually going to be described today.
Oh, so this will be at a
This
later
will
time?
constantly be repeated each time. Take a look down here always where the bold is, and that's what will actually be described and discussed during that meeting.
So,
yes, it will be discussed at a later time.
oh, wonderful. So we'll know, we'll have
Yes.
notice on that.
Yes.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Vineyard.
Sorry, my husband said he was speaking for me but didn't ask me. That's okay most of the time. I just wanted to say I'm Joanna Von Yurt. I'm one of the neighbors at 2016 Mission Ridge Road. And I wanted to say I think this looks wonderful. It will be beautiful to the neighborhood. It's only an enhancement. It's wonderful to come and see that it's actually what was promised. So wonderful, so refreshing. And I just wanted to point out for design, maybe it's something that's your expertise, because there will be a lot of people coming and going in and out of doors and employees back and forth. They tend to talk, hang out, see each other between times that they're going on shift, off of shift. I don't know if it's even a consideration, but maybe somewhere on that left-hand wall within the landscaping, some type of little water feature would really help, because the sounds do echo right up to the corner. So if it's at all a possibility and it fits, that's just a suggestion I would like to make, because water does seem to really dilute that sound. So just a suggestion, but it looks great.
There's so much running around.
Yes.
The Alhambra and swing.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Perhaps, you'd like to speak to this, Ms. O'Reilly?
I
Rogers?
do not think that a water feature in this corner is appropriate or historic for this site. We can ask the employees not to talk and laugh as they come and go, but I think if anyone has noise problems adjacent, they can put water features on their property so they don't have to hear people. Was that too rude?
I'm sorry I asked you. Okay.
That was Katie.
Madam
welcome.
Chair, if
Yes.
there's any question about the eucalyptus trees, I'd be happy to elaborate on that. But
Well,
I'll leave that up to you. I know you want
why
to
don't
move
we
this
see if
on.
there are any questions from the commission?
Madam Chair, I'm assuming that we will have review of that arborist report.
Absolutely.
So-
I'm going to be working with staff on that as well.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
mitigation measure. So.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair. I note on this drawing, is this a cell phone tower?
Why? Because it's not moving in the wind.
If I could go back to that arborist report, 5 different arborists will give you 5 different opinions
Yes.
as to
That's
which trees
true.
come out. Some would say all, some would say none, or could be the range. And that's why hanging our hat on the Planning Commission condition when they're just trying to get on to the next project, it's not very detailed. And so there are ways of doing that, of course, getting 3 opinions or something, but we are going to be very concerned about that, as are the neighbors, obviously.
And just to sort of counter that, oftentimes any historian will give you a different opinion on their historic structures report. So we have to rely on the experts and evaluate and interpret their interpretation amongst the 7 of us for the best outcome. So.
And the over-X for those retaining walls is going to be considerable. And you can't really afford to hand dig it, so I don't know. You know, it's tricky.
The trees that previously this board was interested in were up in this corner, one of which just fell over. So it's a moot point. And the ones down in here, and we're working with Bill Spiewak, and we have said to him that our preference and the historical preference is to keep them. However, if they can't be kept, and if it's not safe, we want to know that. So, yeah,
we
could
have
say
to work
someone
with
else
city
we want
staff
them all out.
on that safety issue, and the city arborist, and this commission.
And the
garage
itself
was
notched to provide more buffer for those.
Right.
Any further questions?
Is there a particular reason that the Phoenix Canariensis is being
removed?
It's in the line of sight triangle, so transportation wants it out of there and fire wants it out of there. And it's actually it's outside of
the property.
I think it's in the city right of way.
Looks that way.
It has been offered to the neighbors. Jan said that he would like it, so it has been offered to them to move over there.
Okay. Any further questions? If there are none, can we have comments, please?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the landscape plan, realizing that you are trying to plant above a roof structure, above a parking structure, there really does need to be more planting on the northwest corner of Cottage 37. And how you accomplish that is really up to you, but to have just the ceanothus or the rosemary come right up to the foundation isn't acceptable.
You want
Katie,
more-
let me finish with
I'm
my
sorry.
comments, please. Possibly wrapping a raised planter around that corner would help. I don't think that the configuration of those raised planters is necessarily appropriate either. It's really setting up sort of a formality, and this is more of an edge of a woodland type thing. So play with the configuration of those planters and try to get more landscaping right on this northwest corner of Cottage 37. I would strongly suggest for your skyline tree that you use Platanus racemosa, the California sycamore.
I had that, but it got nixed by fire. It's on the non-fire safe list. I'll put it back in.
Incorrect. I mean, okay, yeah, but I mean, to use the London plane tree up there is not really appropriate. I don't know how that got on the do not plant list, like the do not fly list, I guess. But anyhow, the hedge material that's encasing the 42-inch high guardrail, I would prefer to see something different than the boxwood, something that doesn't need the clipping like the boxwood does, something that grows a little bit faster. There's, a multitude of different plant material that's not going to require such a formal, clip.
I want a formal clip.
Okay, just the same
I already mentioned about the review of the arborist report. I think that's going to be important. And then just, if I may ask a question, what is the vine that you're proposing, or have you even picked that?
I'm not even there. Right now, It's
Okay.
just the idea of getting some vines on there, which also may not be allowed by fire. But we're just going to start with it.
Okay.
I don't know if I have the plant list on here, but it's the regular plant list.
Okay. That's it.
Can I just ask one question for clarification? When you say more planting in this area, if it's heavily planted outside of the parking garage and not on top of the structure, will that
No.
do what you're after?
That's why I made the comment that having the ceanothus come right up to the foundation really isn't, acceptable. And I think the more you sort of blur this line, where the parking garage is and where, there's Mother Earth, the better. So adding more outside of the structure, the underground structure, doesn't accomplish quite what.
So it's not the view, it's just the whole feeling.
Sort of anchoring those cottages. I think those
And
cottages
as the garage sinks in, I might have more dirt over that corner.
Well, that's the other, that's the other thing too, and the grade goes up there.
Yeah.
Considerably. Yeah. So if you do have that depth, I would prefer not to see a raised planter myself.
Me too.
So.
I would prefer, never mind, but
Why
we have
not
to
mound
plant
it?
on top of it.
Why not mound it?
We may be able to create a retaining wall or something here
and get a
little bit more dirt.
Something needs to happen to weave that corner of the cottage back into the landscape.
Okay. Further comments? No additional comments? Oh, Mr. Schallenberger?
The architecture. It's a little hard to comment because they're so preliminary. I mean, there's not even a floor plan, so I don't really know why some of the things are happening. Some of the parapeted, just the way the roofs interact. I mean, it's all fine at this level concept. There's no massing issues with a 10-foot high, one-story building. I don't think there's any problems with massing. The separation between the buildings is all looks fine, but I think we really need more before we can really provide any kind of architectural comments.
Point well taken. I don't know why there are no floor plans at a concept level.
Also, I think what would be helpful on the site plans for the next review is if we can see outlines either on there. There was a site plan in the index, but I didn't see in a formal site plan an outline of garage below, either on the landscape plan or on the site plan, and then conversely in the garage an outline of units above. That would be helpful for the next review. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just one quick comment. I was wondering if it would be possible to get rid of that parking space where you would have the ability to plant, because that cottage corner is right there, and maybe then just expand. I know you've got a uke here, but just expand that wall to make up and get two spaces here instead of one, and notch that 9 by 18 or whatever the dimension is to get that to where you can get some really nice landscaping at that corner, rather than trying to do something that is over the parking structure.
I'm good with that. This planting or this dirt is more valuable to me on the surface than that.
I know it is,
Here
much.
I've got all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Ms. Kennedy, my question was why we didn't see floor plans at a concept level.
To be really honest, what's driving the shape of the building is Henry Lenny's sketch. This is pretty much undifferentiated office cubicles inside, so...
So you will make the floor plan fit?
We'll put whatever we can get, we'll put offices in. That's what it amounts to.
And, for instance, we don't even know where the doors are going to be. The walkways are going to where doors might end up being based on those sketches.
Elevations.
But there's no program. There's no interior program yet.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And really what we've been asked for from the ownership is just get as many offices or cubicles in there as you can.
Well, I would add to the comment that I was making that drove this issue. The architecture looks fine. I mean, the renderings they're charming, cute little cottages. There's no issue really with the architecture. Just I can't comment on if I don't understand why things are where they are.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I think we do need to resolve as quickly as possible where those doors are occurring, in and out of the building, because that is driving where the circulation is, where the pathways are. And if there doesn't need to be a pathway on the west side of Cottage 39, then this hedge doesn't need to be there. The guardrail doesn't need to be
There's
there.
more than a
Yeah, but there's no
30-inch
there's no pedestrians here.
maintenance people could go in.
I think the building department overlooks that because it's not used by the public. The maintenance is familiar with what the drop-off is.
I think I can answer that, and I think it does need to be there.
Yeah.
It has it's a topography issue,
Right.
like anything else
Yeah.
on this site. To get an accessible path, we really have to come around here.
Right, if
there
that-
isn't a way to get there from there.
If that path has to stay there, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is let's resolve where these doors are so that we know where the circulation is, because that circulation is driving what's happening out there with the landscape. So
The next time you see this, we will have the
I
civil
agree.
fully engaged, and we'll understand the topography a little bit better.
I'm going to summarize the comments and then look for a motion. In general, the architecture is acceptable, given that we've only seen the elevations and you're going to make the floor plans fit the elevations. That's what we're going to assume. Secondly, we'd like to see the arborist report at the next time we come here. Thirdly, the suggestion has been made that the northwest parking space move further south so that we can then successfully blend that northwest corner and provide a little bit more blurring of the line there at that landscape area. With the suggestion has been made that the hedge material at the 42-inch guardrail be a faster growing, less formal, require less formal maintenance
a less formal
material. And that when you present next time graphically, if you put the different levels, either as a dashed line of up above or so on and so forth. So I'll look for a
Madam Chair, may I
motion.
just add one comment, if it's okay with the rest of the commission, and that's to study adding soil to the above the underground roof structure at Cottage 37 to allow for more planting depth.
Okay.
As
I
opposed
thought by moving that space that we were going to allow
That may or may not be enough.
So to the suggestion regarding moving the northwest parking space, if that cannot be done, that we would like to add more dirt,
more soil on top of the garage. Study
on top of the garage.
Yeah.
Shows you I'm not a landscaper.
Yeah, you call things bushes, I'm sure.
It's the ground, it's the floor to me.
Sorry, it is getting late.
So
M&M crash.
did somebody make that motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Indefinite.
Indefinite continuance, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries.
Now we need to talk about the schedule.
About that schedule.
What schedule do you have?
This is a memorandum from Kathleen Kennedy.
Yes.
Which I got.
And so I'm going to remove the arbor restoration from that as a sort of a trivial item now. But everything else seems to be still in play. So how have you figured this out? How many meetings?
9 meetings.
9 meetings with how many subcommittee? I mean, what was your thought about this?
Well, I wanted to get your input on this. I know the applicant has come up with the number of meetings per item that they think will be needed, but
Has the applicant revised his opinion?
I have.
Okay.
Madam
So still
Chair,
9 meetings?
in general, we're trying to bring at least two project components per meeting for this duration of the next 8 meetings now. And we know, things will have to shift around, and, if we should come back with Cottage 12, for example, to the subcommittee first before we come to that agenda, however we can facilitate that and not take up a lot of meeting time too, we're open to
So
any
is that the
suggestions.
suggestion that you want to run things by the subcommittee before it comes to full, or?
It would be really up to your discretion if that would help the meeting time, the time we spend in this room with you.
That would be really helpful.
Should this be tied to your phasing? I mean, in terms of what would get released first for construction?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah. I mean, we could come and just talk to the subcommittee about the schedule and then any specifics.
It's on.
I think I'm on.
You were off.
So It's a work in progress as far as I see it. The next.
I mean, we have some pretty major, items. I mean, the swimming pool and fitness center, I think, was still sort of unresolved, and no.
Well, we certainly hashed that over
I mean,
enough.
everything was, aside from this corner, everything had reached a level where we could continue on with
Right.
positive comments to Planning Commission.
Certainly.
So now
I
we're
beg your
coming back.
pardon then, yeah.
So we wanted, I'm sorry that, there wasn't a lot of information here, but my guidance was to at least show you this today before Gensler did move forward into further developing this, because you hadn't seen it at all yet. So this one's a little bit different. Our next goal is to submit the Mission Village corner. And that would have to accompany Cottage 12 because we got the 2-week continuance today. So we would have those 2 items in our next review cycle. So we're trying, Gensler can only work so fast to produce the drawings to come back here.
Well,
So there's
it's easier for the commission. And it also behooves the applicant, though, if we continue this discussion of the northwest corner. I mean, we've started it now, and we've got some momentum and some good comments behind it. And if we now then take that northwest corner and put it back 4 meetings or whatever.
it would be not the next meeting, but the following is what we're targeting for.
Okay. My point is that once we've started on something, keep that
Momentum.
going close to the last review date, because otherwise you're going to get completely different comments, and that doesn't help you.
I understand.
I think we do need to have the gap there just because of the way our drawings are being developed. Right now, we're leaning pretty heavily in this corner. And
Mr. Suding, you may have thought that we didn't need a landscape person, but I personally do think we need one.
And I think Ms. Feliciano just sent out a email with the revised subcommittee assignments, and it looks like I am on that.
Yeah,
Very
very good. For the other reason is, with this frequency, we're not necessarily going to get all 3 at that time, people at once. So we're going to need 4 in case we drop one each time. So I think that makes sense. It's just too frequent for working people to make every meeting. So,
We'll work closely with staff. Staff can be in contact with you to decide if a subcommittee meeting is needed for any particular review date. That's fine.
And what would be particularly helpful, even though it may flux and it may move, would be for the applicant and staff to get together and assign approximate dates for the review so that the public can see what is on the agenda and not be confused like they were today, and we apologize for that. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you being here. If staff and the applicant could get together and assign some meeting dates to these things.
that would be good. And then if we could actually do a fairly routine schedule, so that would be, it's going to be hard to find a time.
Yeah, and then if people want to come and look at the plans, they already look at those specific ones and with.
Will you be presenting each?
there are 2 of us that will probably tag team a little bit, but I'll be one of the presenters.
Okay. Do you have any other concerns, Ms. Kennedy, in terms of?
Have we decided when we would have items go to subcommittee, a little bit more direction on?
I think the items should go to subcommittee before they come to the full board, or full commission.
Well, I think Ms. Allen was suggesting that we work with you and you make a preference decision, or you be guessing,
Right.
as to whether or not an item can come before us and have a smooth sail, or if it needs to be worked over by the subcommittee.
Okay. I'm thinking like Mission Village is the next big one that you wanted to bring in, and would that be something we could bring to the committee first? Subcommittee first, right before.
Well, I would think on a first go-around of something like Mission Village, you might want to go to the whole committee first, and then go to subcommittee.
I have a thought that possibly use the subcommittee in a different way than we've traditionally used it because of this crazy schedule. I think you're right. If it comes to the full board and you have issues, then it goes to the subcommittee to work out those issues before it comes back to full board.
Right.
If something happens, like for instance the arbor gets passed, we don't need to have a subcommittee that week, and that gets you off the hook. So possibly that might be
Everybody
a more efficient way of using the time.
Right. So we'll come, if you'll come each time to the first, and then the subcommittee will get the gist, and then we'll know what we need to work with. That makes sense. Ms. Leslie, do you have a question about that?
Just only if we might be able to get a copy of the rendering that was presented today of the corner. Is that possible?
That is up to the applicant.
That is up to the applicant, if you would talk to them about that.
With yeah. There you go. You ask and you shall receive.
You guys have the ability to share what's submitted.
Okay. Is it all worked out?
I'll make a motion to
Resign.
this meeting.
To adjourn. She wants to adjourn. I will. All those in favor, go. Yes.
And where are we going?